Mel, all the way from Australia. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now it's my turn to visit you.
I know. Thank you for having me out for, what was it called? It was the Remedy Social. There's so many different remedies: RMDY Collective, RMDY Social, RMDY Academy. We're going to talk about all of them. Yeah, I love it. Which was an incredible event. Got to really immerse myself with you and your community and your whole team. It was awesome. It's so great. So had to return the favor, have you out here.
Yeah, I love it.
So if you could just introduce yourself to start, give a background of how you got into homeopathy, who you are, what you do, and then we'll go from there.
Yep. So I'm an Australian homeopath. I started off in naturopathics. So really was focusing more on the herbs. So dad's a doctor, mum's a hippie. So I just sort of thought, yeah, I'll bridge the two and do naturopathy. But I was 2 years into that when my sister was just chronically sick. So my sister Ash that you've met. And she was in and out of hospital at that point from when she was 16 till about 21. And it would be if she had sex, she would get a UTI that was so severe, the infection would seemingly go to her whole body systems. She's in the hospital, IV antibiotics, sometimes like an oxygen mask, like it was severe. And so she had the best specialists in the hospitals. They couldn't figure out why her body was reacting like that. And so it just seemed like this big mystery. So then she does all of the medical treatments and nothing works. And then she does all of the holistic treatments. So she does the naturopathics, the diet, the grounding, the meditation. She quits her job. By this point, she's 21 and her bladder is like pretty much completely incontinent from just all the damage that it's going through, all of the drugs. So she has to literally go to the toilet every 20 minutes. So like she can't even hold down a full-time job, right? And so the doctors at the last appointment I went to with her, they said, we need you on prophylactic antibiotics every day for the rest of your life, and you cannot have sex because it's dangerous and you could get very sick.
Antibiotics every single day
as a prophylactic against these UTIs that would sort of take over our body. And so that's obviously just like a sentence to a 21-year-old that's just like, how do I ever have a family or a life? And so when I'm at college, I had this lecturer and he used to say to me, oh, you'd love homeopathy, you know, like you'd be really good at it, you should. And I'd never heard of homeopathy before. And when you're studying at a college of natural medicine and you've never heard of it, you just think like it must be very average. If I've never heard of it, it's probably really crap. I'm like not interested.
Or it's like way fringe that it's not even worth exploring.
And it's like, I'm not going to do a 2-year degree or something on something that's so fringe, you know, that no one knows it. But he said it to me one day again when she was in hospital again. And I was like, right, that's it. And I just said, if you can cure my sister's chronic condition, I'll change my degree over tomorrow. He's like, great, when can she meet with me? And so we met with him the next week and we're just sitting in a coffee shop. He's got a pen and paper and he's literally asking about her entire life, like all of these obscure questions that you're like, why would someone want to know that? So he's asking about childhood, you know, life growing up. What was the family dynamic like? How were you with vaccines? Did you tolerate them well? He's literally like a medical detective and he's going through her life with a fine-tooth comb. And then he starts to ask about like anger. How are you with like, you know, expressing your anger? And it's like, well, she's fine. She doesn't really have much anger in her. He's like, okay, what do you like with like road rage? You know, something like that. And we laugh because we're like, oh, she's a psycho. She would just, rah, you know. And as women, sometimes we are disconnected from how we actually feel and we say, no, I'm fine. You know, I don't have suppressed grief. I don't got any of these issues, but it comes up, right? It manifests in these different ways. And so we're like, oh, okay. And his hypothesis then from that is that the UTIs were being manifest from suppressed anger and resentment. Now, it's common in homeopathy that if you have any of that suppressed anger or resentment towards a male partner, like if they've a history of like being dominated, they're told what to do, something like that. So if you've got a bad boyfriend, you can imagine having sex. It's like an intimate thing. It's like very, you know, emotional, spiritual. Your body can kick off as a response to that. And that was his hypothesis. Then he gives her this little bottle of medicine and he says, I want you to take 2 drops under the tongue every morning and every night. Check in with me in 6 weeks. And I'm just like, is that really like what we're going to do? 2 drops under the tongue for this serious, like systemic condition.
And you've tried everything, both holistic and allopathic.
All of it. Acupuncture, like literally everything. And so she does it. And within 2 days a lot of discharges are coming out. And I'm like, what on earth? But she noticed that the incontinence had left. So she could now go hours between going to the toilet. So something is shifting immediately. And then comes this purging of all of these emotions. I mean, all of this childhood stuff. She just had no conscious awareness of any of it. And it's just like spewing out of her mouth, this anger, this resentment. And because he told us about it, I guess we sort of were like, oh, I guess this is a good sign. It's like normal, whatever, she's moving through it. And long story short, she never had that same cycle again, was not hospitalized, no more IV antibiotics. Like she broke that cycle. And now, of course, the doctors, if you were to see him, it's like she has a family, she has kids, which they had just said, you can never have sex, it's too dangerous. And so it really, to me, when I saw that happen, I was really thinking, what the hell have I just seen? And I couldn't really comprehend it. And that's when I started to dig in the books. And I went to the library at my college and I borrowed every book on homeopathy. And I'm reading it and I just like can't even believe what I'm reading. And it's the history of homeopathy that really sold me. It's really the hidden history of homeopathy in the world that I just thought, how on earth did I not know? Mm-hmm. And from there, you see that this is a medical system that is so organized, homeopathy, and it's absolutely incredible. But fundamentally, it's tying in the spirit, the mental and emotional, your physical symptoms. We're a whole organism, and that is reflected in our disease states, in our mental states. Totally. And if we want to heal her physical UTIs and infections, we had to heal the emotions. And of course, we all know no other system can really touch it like homeopathy. You go to the medical doctor, of course, they have no idea about this link, and their drugs can't touch the spirit of a person, these traumatic wounds that manifest. It's in our field, it's in our energy. But even there are other modalities, even naturopathics. And as much as like I can love plants and herbs and, but people are, sometimes that's being treated like green pharmacy,
Totally.
We're just suppressing, we're not getting to the core. And you'll hear heaps of people say like, I'm a root cause practitioner. And as far as I'm concerned, if you're not addressing like that fundamental field level, that's not root cause.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've come to the position that the overwhelming majority of physical disease states ultimately have an emotional, psychospiritual underpinning. Like, I don't know that I can say that that's exclusive, but I would say that the overwhelming majority that I come across, I'm like, yeah, I bet there's some emotional component there, some psychospiritual component there for sure.
And even say when you look at, let's say you get a medical intervention into like, your body, and it's like toxins straight into your body. And then we see some disease processes kick off. But to be honest, what we even see in our patients is that their field was already susceptible. There's a portion of people, and I can tell who's going to have the reaction. I can tell who's going to be sensitive to mold, issues, because you feel like you wonder, why are some people seemingly so robust? Their body can withstand such a toxic load and they still seem strong, like in all these things. And again, it's a field issue.
Totally. Totally. One question on that with your sister, what was her perception or her perspective of homeopathy prior to taking these homeopathic remedies? Because, and I want to get into this later, a lot of people will say, it's just placebo, nocebo effect taking effect in this. So what was her perspective on it before taking these?
I mean, you'd have to compare it. If we're going to talk about a placebo effect, don't you think that when we went into this prestigious hospital with their head of infectious diseases in his white coat, she is conditioned and indoctrinated to believe that, but
Totally.
all of his drugs did nothing. And then we meet this, he looked like a hippie, had long hair, 50-year-old guy, and in a coffee shop with people all around us. And he says, just take 2 drops of this under the tongue. And that is what worked. But I definitely had that thought of, could this possibly be a placebo? So I didn't change my degree immediately. I said to him, I started digging into all those books and I'm fascinated, but I said, well, now I want you to treat me. And if I have a similar response, because I'll know if it's me, if it does something, then I'll change. So that I did that. I saw him then as a patient, and it's similar, like to my sister, outrageous emotional purging immediately within 12 hours of something that I was not consciously aware of. I had an outbreak of cold sores all over my lips. So I took this remedy, and he prescribed me a remedy called sulfur. He said, take 2 drops. I took 2 drops when I was at uni, threw it in my bag, completely forgot about it, and wasn't expecting much, because you have to know that I didn't know anything about homeopathy. I didn't know anything about how healing would actually look, like what symptoms come back as you're healing. I'm like 22 years old. And so I throw it in, and I have a splitting headache that afternoon. And I'm not prone to headaches, but it is like my head's going to split open. I'm like, what is going on? I go home and have this massive emotional purging, like my mum just sobbing, and from stuff that's so historical. I'm saying to my mum, do you remember when and you did this? And she's like, what is going on with you? Are you okay? Oh, no, I'm not okay. I purge, and then we just like have a hug, and she's like, yeah, do you want to come up for dinner? And I'm like, yeah, okay. And it was just over, and I completely forgot about it. When I woke up the next morning, massive head cold, like brewing, and I'm quite a robust constitution. You see that in the sulfur patients. They're pretty strong. They don't, get sick often. I have like 7 cold sores all over my lips. I've never had 7 cold sores. I used to get them on and off, and I've got like a bit of head cold. I'm like, well, I go to uni, and the head cold is progressing, and you would know, it's a detox symptom. My body's like mobilizing whatever toxins and trying to get them out very quickly. Sulfur has a massive impact on the liver and triggers this detox response. And so the headache as well, my liver is like, it's just dealing with this massive onslaught of toxicity. And I'm like, realize I'm too sick to actually be here and study today. I'm actually going to go home. I've like never done that before. I'm like, I'm going to go home. And I bump into Peter, my homeopath, in the stairwell. And he's like, how you going? I'm like, oh yeah, I'm good. I'm like, I'm actually really sick. I'm going home. He's like, oh great, the sulfur's working. I'm like, what do you mean it's working? I was like, do you think this is related? And he's like, yeah, certainly, and he gives me like a really, and I'm like, oh. And I said, yeah, I've got all these cold sores. And he said, well, don't suppress them. Don't put in any sort of, Zavirax, nothing like that. He said, let your body's turfing it out. The body heals from the inside to the outside. And I have never had a cold sore since then. Never.
Wow.
That was over 10 years ago. And I used to get them like every couple of months. I've never had it since then. My body was able to blast it out onto the surface, and we're done. And, there was that, the head cold, the headache. And then he said, mentally and emotionally, how are you feeling? I said, good. And I said, actually, I had a big blow up last night. And he's like, oh, great. What was it about? And I said, oh, it was about actually my parents' divorce and like how rough that was for me. And I was saying to my mum, do you remember like how hard you made it for me? And he said, oh, brilliant. Yep. Your vital force is just addressing the one trauma that you had. And I'm just like, holy crap. Mm-hmm. And it was like from that moment on, I was like, all right, you got me. I'll study.
So you're studying to be a naturopath. And then so at that point you're like, all right, I got to look into homeopathy a little bit more seriously.
I completely bailed on naturopathy. I wasn't
That's crazy.
I wasn't like, I'll finish this degree. I've already like 2 years in. I was like, bye.
That's pretty wild though. You're 2 years in. You're like, all right, no, this isn't it.
Because I found what felt like the holy grail. And I feel that way to this day. I would never prescribe herbs and supplements because I see what homeopathy can do, makes it almost redundant for me. It's one thing to say that people should, have a good nutritional value, and we can talk about, the soil and not being enough. And so maybe people want to do a bit of topping up with that sort of stuff, but that's different. In terms of treating a chronic disease, homeopathy covers the whole thing.
Yeah, especially after having these real life experiences. I mean, that's why I'm so passionate about what I do. It's because of real experiences witnessing my wife drastically reverse autoimmune conditions, et cetera, et cetera. So it's cool hearing that from you. I actually didn't know that about your story. So it's really cool because it makes it more an authentic expression. You're such a good representative for this because you've literally witnessed, despite being incredibly skeptical, miraculous things occur by employing homeopathy.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's where, if you look throughout history, the number of people, they were skeptics. I think it's healthy to be skeptical of something.
Right.
I'm not into like just blindly trusting whoever says what. And these were all medically trained doctors who, so say even the founder of homeopathy, he's a medically trained doctor. He realizes that they're doing pretty much heroic medicine back in that day, bloodletting, mercury, all of that. He finds homeopathy and it's like they can compare and they're like, oh my gosh, this is the way. And, there's a famous homeopath called Constantine Herring, and he was like the star pupil, right? And the he worked in like, is it the Napoleon army in like Leipzig? So he was like penned to be their number one shining star. And homeopathy was like rising in popularity. And they actually said to him, we need you to go and write an article and just smash them, try and like knock them off because like they're just getting too big for their boots. And I think a lot of them genuinely believed that it was riffraff, and he went. And so here is like the biggest skeptic, and he's trying to write this article to debunk it. And then he realizes, holy crap, this is a very scientific, genuinely scientific method of practicing medicine. And he has an injury, Herring, when they're doing like a postmortem dissection. And the allopaths, they say, you need to amputate your finger. And he's like, oh my God, he wants to be like a doctor, a surgeon, whatever. And then the homeopath says, you need this remedy, arsenicum album. And he took it, and his finger healed, and he didn't need it amputated. The biggest skeptics, when they are converted in a way like that, you have your own experience. He then became like one of the biggest fanaticals. I mean, he's going into the pubs and he's standing up on the tables, and then he's hard against the cutthroats, these other doctors that he then considers now what they are doing is dangerous.
Let's get into the history of homeopathy, but before we get there, I want to start with what homeopathy actually is for those who may be new to it entirely.
So it's an energetic system of medicine. So we acknowledge the vital force that is within every human being. You're born with it. At the moment of conception, the sperm reaches the egg. We see that flash of light, the zinc spark. And it's this divine energetic blueprint that goes forward to knit that baby together. So it's an extremely intelligent force, and we all have it within us. And you just think no conscious effort from the mother, and it knows how to knit together a spinal cord and functioning eyes and keep the blood flow and like all of these things. It's just so outrageously smart. But that energetic blueprint, like it never leaves us. It's not when you're born, it's still there. You cut yourself, your body knows immediately how to heal it. So really all the body knows how to heal and try to keep that balance for people. But throughout life, we experience like toxic exposures, traumas. And the other thing that's really huge that homeopathy addresses is the energetics that we inherit. So you'll hear mainstream people talk about the genetics, the DNA, the genes. We say no, it's the energetics that they have inherited. And the truth is that can absolutely railroad someone's life. Like you will see disease pathology coming down family lines, but it's not because of these genes that are stuck and rigid. It's because of the energetics in their blueprint. So what we need to do is rewire that blueprint. And this is where homeopathy comes in. So the basis of the system of medicine is the principle one that like cures like. So in homeopathic pharmacy, we go out into nature and we collect a range of different substances. Now, everything is actually made of energy and it has its own unique signature vibration. So arnica is a common homeopathic that a lot of people know. And Arnica montana, the plant, when you harvest it and you make it into a homeopathic remedy, you've taken the vibrational essence of that living thing, that plant. Now, when you give that to somebody who has a soft tissue injury, maybe they've been in a car accident and they're like shocked and traumatized, and all of this is classic for arnica, and you give their body that vibrational imprint, the body recognizes it because it's in the same state as that arnica vibration, and the body is strong enough to push back and overcome those symptoms. So that's why we see rapid healing. And if you look at arnica under the petri dish, they've had some human tissue and they expose it to the arnica vibration with the homeopathics on one, and they leave the other as a control. They do nothing. And you look at the platelets, the white blood cells, what the body proliferates in healing, it's rapid. So homeopathy, it's like It's like medical alchemy, really.
Yeah.
The idea that we can facilitate rapid healing, that sort of defies the laws of what we have perceived the body is capable of doing. You see these, like my sister, spontaneous, rapid recoveries. With other people, like with physical disease, it can be instantaneous, which is so powerful in homeopathy. Sometimes we think with these natural medicines, well, it's slow and you really got to heal and get everything at balance. Homeopathy works on the energetic field. Energy precedes mass. If you change the field, you change the way that hormones are released, you change the way that tissues are formed, that organs function, it's immediate. So when I took that sulfur and my body went into rapid detox, my head is aching, my liver is pumping it out, it just is rapid. So that's sort of our chemical process of homeopathy to self-heal. And the idea is your body has all of the intelligence that it needs. It knows the hierarchy of also what needs to be healed first. So some people will come to a homeopath. I've had guys who come and maybe they've got psoriasis and they're like, I want to heal the psoriasis. And it's like, okay, cool. We can absolutely do that. But when I give you the remedy that's well indicated to match your unique blueprint, your energy, your body's going to decide what needs to go first. And so often it's this traumatic muck from their childhood, all of this sort of stuff, maybe some ancestral stuff. Maybe there was like severe mental health in the family history. And I don't get to tell your body, do the psoriasis first. Because, actually skin conditions, that's the most superficial part of your body. That's the safest place to dump a distortion. But your mental health, if you're seriously depressed or anxious, that can be dangerous to the organism. So your body gets to decide what is most important first. So it's working with the divine intelligence within you, and we only stimulate your own self-healing mechanism. It's not the homeopathy that heals you. It's not the arnica. You heal you, but we stimulate your energetic field. Because sometimes people's energy, it has gotten off track. And I find in, the holistic world, a lot of us, we sit back and we say, the body only knows how to heal, like it's trying its best for you, like sit back, accept and give it space. And there is, like, I understand that notion. And at the same time, we do have people with chronic, debilitating, painful things that they're going through. And their energy has gotten off track. And we need to stimulate it back into alignment so that they can thrive.
Man, the one thing that comes up for me with that is I have thought in the past on a number of occasions, because homeopathy appears to be so incredibly effective instantaneously, like this must be symptom reduction. It must just be stopping symptoms. But I love what you said there about it being helping to stimulate healing. That's the whole point of it, because I think a lot of people in the holistic health space falsely conclude that it is about symptom reduction. So can you talk to me a little bit more about how it's actually helping to facilitate lasting healing?
When we look at it in an acute sense, a child has a fever. We know this is very immunoprotective. When you give the homeopathic remedy, let's say belladonna, and your child, and you would only, as a mother, I would only ever intervene if they look genuinely uncomfortable. If my 3 boys are running a fever, but they're still happy and like going around, I'm like, sweet, just do whatever. I won't even intervene at all because it's just not needed. Some children, when they're running a fever, their pupils are dilated, they're hallucinating, they've got throbbing pains, they're freaking out. When you give the homeopathic remedy, it does not cut that fever out. But what you'll often see is that the child then just lays down and falls asleep. It's a more productive way for the body. We're gently nudging it in the right direction. The same goes, sometimes I have parents and their child's had a cough. They've got a cough. And they're trained in that way to think, oh, they've got a cough, I need to treat it. And they will give homeopathic remedies that are well indicated for a cough. And they say, they've still got the cough. Why isn't it going away? And when you explain to them, a cough is a productive mechanism of your body to get toxic crap up out of your lungs. So if your child has a lingering cough, leave it alone. It's fine. But, we had one of our boys and we were sleeping in the caravan and he was coughing, this like dry hacking cough. And Matt and I look at each other and we're like, oh, get up. And we gave him a cough blend of homeopathic remedies. And Matt went and gave it to him. And then we jumped back into bed. And his very next cough sounded extremely different immediately, instantly. It was a wet cough. You could hear the phlegm. And then he just goes to see, he doesn't cough again. And so you can see there what the body has immediately done. It's like lubricated the lungs a little bit, probably pushed those toxins out, cough, 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 phlegm, we're done here. So it's very powerful in that sense. The last example I'll give you is, let's say you've got gastro symptoms, right? The kids have got stomach bug and vomiting, diarrhea, and it's really intense. Now we have a homeopathic remedy called Arsenicum album. It is made out of the poison arsenic. But when you make a homeopathic remedy in a pharmacy, you take a tiny bit of arsenic, you dilute it, and you succuss it. So you're putting that arsenic in water, shaking it vigorously. That releases the energy into the water. And I know a lot of your friends understand water has memory.
Totally.
It holds on to the molecule structure of the arsenic, but then you dilute it again and you succuss it again. So you get to this point where the arsenic from my first aid kits, it's so diluted and succussed that there is no poison in it, but the energy is very strong.
Just the memory in the water.
The memory.
Yeah.
And your body responds to the energetic field, right? So when we give a child with gastro the Arsenicum album, the arsenic memory, what we find is that the children will often have a massive power chuck. And what it is that the body, it's not, if you go to a doctor and you take an antiemetic or something that stops you from vomiting, or you take some sort of, drug to plug up your diarrhea, you are leaving festering toxins potentially in the body.
100%.
Your body was very intelligently trying to get rid of it.
Yep.
But then when you give homeopathy and they have this power chuck and then they look at the parents and they're like completely fine. The parents are like, oh my God, what the hell was that?
Yeah.
The body was stimulated intelligently. There's toxins here, get it out. And then they're fine. So it's that alchemical process of we just speed it up, that rapid healing from within. We do not symptom suppress.
Yeah.
One aspect with that Arsenicum album that will just really highlight how it works. If you were to ingest arsenic, people used to get arsenic poisoning. And what were the symptoms of that? Vomiting and diarrhea. Obviously, it's a poison. The body's like, ew, get out. That's how in homeopathy, we come to have these textbooks that understand exactly what arsenic in a homeopathic preparation should be used for. So if you get those symptoms when you take the crude dose of it, you are using that principle of like cures like. Mirror it back to the body with the energy so that the body can heal those symptoms.
Bring balance, essentially. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. How was homeopathy discovered? I know a little bit about it with Samuel Hahnemann, but if you could just describe it in detail that I couldn't, I really appreciate that.
I mean, okay, so we look at Hahnemann. He is an absolute genius. He knows 11 languages. He's like hectic, very, very smart.
And he was an MD, right?
He was a medical physician, Yep. And he just found when he graduated, he could not in good conscience practice this barbaric sort of medicine. Right. He considered it extremely harmful. He said, I would not want my children treated this way. He had a lot of kids. And he said, until I can figure out a better way, I cannot practice. So he retired from that and he got a job in Baron von Bruckenfell's library. So here is a guy he's the richest man in Romania and he has a library in Hermannstadt, which is one of the largest. So it was the largest in Europe, but collection of esoteric texts. So we're talking rare manuscripts, things that very few people have ever seen or read. And Hahnemann, knowing 11 different languages and being fluent in transcribing them, he could actually read all of these, no matter what language they're in. So his job then was translating medical texts. So the sorts of things that you're seeing in that library is like Isaac Newton's, all of his work on alchemy. So everyone knows him for discovering the laws of gravity. Very few people know what work he was doing in alchemy and trying to understand the nature of this world. They were really seeking this knowledge. Francis Bacon, Robert Boyle, like these people who did amazing work. But Paracelsus was probably the most foundational influence on Hahnemann. And when you read the work of Paracelsus, like, it's understandable why some people would think Paracelsus was really the first homeopath, because he's understanding whether something is a poison or a cure, it depends on the dose. So he did it sort of famously with mercury and syphilis. So syphilis is a venereal disease that was killing so many people back then. And it was gnarly. Like, it was crazy. They just had so many people dying of syphilis. And we also know that they were using mercury as a drug. Now, the issue is that they were using far too much mercury, that they were poisoning and killing people. But when you use a tiny, tiny dose of mercury for somebody with syphilis, what you find is it's the principles of like cures like. It's a similar disease, because if you have mercury poisoning, you develop symptoms like rotting ulcers, all of the symptoms that people with syphilis had. So that's why he actually had a ring that he used to put the tiniest little bit of mercury in, and he would go into their room of these rich people that he was being called to come and treat them for their syphilis, and he would put it in their drink, this minute dose of mercury, and they would be healed. And so he's getting famous, and people wondering, how is he doing it? He was using like cures like and the minute dose. So Hahnemann is exposed to all of these things. Whether Hahnemann, he never formally admitted it, but we know he worked in that library. And there's actually a log in that library to this day that shows what books he read and translated. So he knew. But he was also brilliant himself. But he goes forward from there, and he has this revelation, for himself personally, and he starts to run experiments more and more. And it was around malaria and cinchona. And he's just realized again, and he tested it on himself. So he takes the Peruvian bark, and it creates the symptoms of malaria, fever, sweating, all of this. And so he then deduced from that, okay, if I can take this substance and it causes these symptoms, then anyone out there with malaria who has these same symptoms, I can give them this homeopathic preparation and their body will heal itself.
Wow.
Like cures like. And that's when he started to get into creating his own pharmacy and getting all of these medicines underway. So that's really how he discovered those laws of.
How did he go from like understanding the substance itself in the principles of like cure like would help facilitate healing to, okay, it's not even the substance, it's not even the molecule, so to speak, of the substance, it's the energetic imprint of the substance. Like, where did that jump come in?
Yeah.
Because that's like a big jump, because that is bridging the gap or jumping from a materialistic chemical-based version of reality to understanding like, no. This energy is far beyond that. This is more about energy and a field effect that is created, whether he called it that or not.
Yeah. And I mean, we're talking the end of the 1700s is when this guy is having these profound breakthroughs. So what he started to do was he was testing on all of the people around him that he could recruit. He like famously tested a lot of these substances on his kids. And what he would do is he would slowly break it down. So let's say he was starting with the arsenicum, the arsenic, and he would like try a dose and he's like, no, it's still too much. It's causing like a bit of poisoning. Dilute and succuss it again and do it. So he started to experiment, and he found that the further down that he diluted it and succussed it, it actually seemed to make the remedy more potent, more strong, even though there was less poison. So I'd say he just started to experiment, and he went less and less and less. And he famously, he's banging these remedies. He's making them by hand. So these days people make it in pharmacies and you have machines that can succuss and get them going. He's banging these remedies on his Bible again, dilute, bang, bang, bang. And yeah, he just found that worked.
Interesting. I wonder like if he recognized at that time, though, I wouldn't know because I've not read any of his works, that, okay, clearly there's not any of the chemical constituents of this thing left, and it's just the energetic imprint. And if not him, who in the homeopathy world then started to understand like it has nothing to do with the physical substance. It's more about the energetic imprint on the water. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
and I mean, they were like godly men, a lot of them, Paracelsus, Hahnemann. And they understood the spirit, probably more than people do these days.
Totally.
They understood that vital, and a lot of them back then, it was vitalistic. This is the God-given spirit that animates the human body. They really acknowledged that. So I think he sort of was able to more easily make the leap into that more etheric world. And when you're looking at alchemy, you're looking at sort of the life force of the plant, separating that and then feeding it back. So I think they had a lot of knowledge.
It's a good point. He's reading alchemy books. Like
he understands, that energy and spiritual, nature.
Totally. Yeah. So I want to get into the history of homeopathy now too, because this is something that I've only learned within the last 6 to 8 months, that there were homeopathic hospitals across the Western world. And we're talking about like recent history, like very recent history. And virtually no one outside of homeopathic circles actually knows that this was the case. Like we're talking early 1900s, late 1800s, there were homeopathic hospitals all across the Western world that were having tremendous success in treating people of various diseases and symptoms and things like this. And no one knows that. So you and I were talking yesterday as we were driving by the Texas State Capitol building and just talking about like how easy it is to shift people's narratives surrounding what actually might have happened with these various buildings and things like this. But this is really a more recent example, and it's like slapping us right in the face that, oh my goodness, within the last 100, 150 years, this was the case across the Western world and no one knows.
Yeah.
It shows how easy it is to manipulate history. It's wild.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess it started, Hahnemann's gaining traction. He starts to get followers everywhere. All of the men, and they were mainly all medical doctors back then who converted because they're medically trained. They're interested in healing.
Converted to homeopaths.
Yes.
Because they saw success with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's like a domino effect.
Yeah.
Once you find it, then you bring the others in and you say, oh my God, look at this. And they go, wow, I'm going to do that. And they commit their lives to it. And so it was just expanding around the world. Now, the rich and famous, homeopathy has always been used by the elites, European, monarchs. And, in Washington, D.C., you guys only have one statue that honors a medical physician. There's only one. And out of all the medical doctors, everyone in America, they actually chose to erect a statue of a German, and that is Samuel Hahnemann, the founder of homeopathy. That's the only person. It's a massive, memorial type thing. And it's because it was so famous among presidents, elites. They loved it. They did a big, I think they had the president there at the time when they unveiled that. And it was just in thanks for all of the advancements that homeopathy had made. So where it really started to establish itself was when there were outbreaks of things in the past, akin to like a pandemic style type thing that was sweeping through. And with these homeopathic hospitals, you get to see the mortality rates that they had there. And it compares, then to the allopathics and what they were doing in the other established hospitals. And so when you look at, for example, Spanish flu in 1918, you've got the homeopathic hospitals and the mortality rates is 1.05%. That's the amount of patients that they lost percentage-wise. And then you go to the hospital in Pittsburgh, and they had a 30% mortality rate. And so it was obvious, which system was working. So homeopathy rises in fame. They open more. And so you had over 100 homeopathic hospitals around the 1900s across the US alone. You had over 1,000 pharmacies. And homeopathy was taught in 22 sort of major medical schools. But and it's funny too, because back then, established medicine, they still tried to, talk crap to midwives, naturopaths and say, well, you're not learned, you guys don't know. But they couldn't say that to the homeopaths because most of them were doctors back then. And it was really, they were very competitive, these two. Now, homeopathy at that point is so famous that they actually started their own medical association first. So it was 1844 the homeopaths are like rising and they say, right, guys, we need cohesiveness. We need like sort of an association. So they form, I think it's the AIH, American Institute of Homeopathy, I think it was. Mm-hmm. Now, in response to that, the allopaths go, holy crap, look at them. We need to form our own association.
Don't they form the AMA?
AMA, 2 years later. So they have just followed us. And then in the AMA, they said, now, if you want to practice homeopathy, you will lose your registration with us. You cannot practice medicine, like established medicine, if you're also going to use homeopathy. So they drew that line there. But what I find is funny is that the AMA also brought out this other, like regulation. They wrote it into their code of ethics. So in 1855, so you think AMA formed in 46, big competition with homeopathy. It's like very controversial. And then, 9 years later, they said, all right, we've already told you can't practice homeopathy and be a doctor. But now, if you even consult with a homeopath on a case, if you are caught talking to a homeopath, if we see anything, you will lose the right to practice allopathic medicine.
Didn't you say there were some examples there was like a husband and wife where one was a homeopath and one was just a regular medical physician? And
they said, you cannot. That is insane. And you just think, how did they ever get away with that?
Yeah.
But there was also, they had these laws. So in regards to the you can't be a doctor and a homeopath, Massachusetts, so Boston, that was one state where they couldn't enforce it because there were so many like elites in Boston who did both that the AMA wasn't able to enforce it. So they're like, all right, you're the exception. We will allow it for a bit longer. Mm-hmm. So they got away with practicing both. But yeah, they were really heavy-handedly just trying to stomp it out. So then they come for the education facilities. So when you go into a university then, you've got Rockefellers like figuring out petrochemical drugs at the same time. And essentially it just comes down to finances. They say, I will give you, let's say, a donation of $5 million on the premise that you will no longer teach homeopathic medicine in this university.
Yeah, so it's the same exact type of thing that happens now.
Yeah. But what's funny is that J.D. Rockefeller, he was actually a big fan of homeopathy personally, and he'd said that openly. So his like famous quote that he said is, homeopathy is a progressive and aggressive step in medicine. So the Rockefeller family, they had 3 private homeopaths. They were actually all female, I believe. So they had 3 private homeopaths that looked after their family. Meanwhile, then the Flexner Report, all this stuff comes out, and it's just they didn't want homeopathy taught anymore. Mm-hmm. But even if you look at the Queen of England, who's just passed, she won't go anywhere without a homeopathic first aid kit. She's very open about it. She says allium cepa cured her hay fever. That's a homeopathic preparation made from onion, actually. And, the royal family has always had their homeopathic physician. That's their system of medicine that they go to. And the average person, you should be asking, why is it good for them, the richest people in the world? Why do they all use it? And yet we don't even know it exists or what it can do. And we don't have places that we can just go anymore. Those hospitals had to shut down because financially they couldn't keep it going.
They're just pushed out by the AMA and the whole Rockefeller medical system.
Yep, yeah, absolutely.
Wow. So it's just wild to think that that's how easy it is and that's how quickly history can be totally rewritten. Like it's wild. Yeah.
Because say back then, just like, let's say scarlet fever, right? So scarlet fever is going around and people are really like dying, like a lot from it. And you had at that time lines around the homeopaths' houses. So everyone wants belladonna and like literally around the block waiting to see the homeopath and get dispensed their medicine. It's like that's how well known it was back then as a preventative for people getting sick. And now these days, people just have no idea what they're missing until they find it. Then they feel like, oh man, this is like everything that I have been looking for in one very scientific, organized system of medicine. Every aspect of it makes sense, but it also works like with the like universal laws of the human body. So people like it because it is holistic, but it's so powerful.
Yeah. I was looking off camera at Kylie when you were talking about how stuff started to come up because I've been taking Arum and Syphilinum, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but like I've been so I don't know, nostalgic about our kids growing up, and you had mentioned that your husband feeling the same when he was taking Arum. It's really interesting. I want to talk about miasms and trauma and the more, because it's like one thing to treat the physical side of things, and I do want to discuss that as well because we've talked about the Spanish flu and things like this. But again, going back to the understanding that I think the overwhelming majority of things are psycho-spiritual, emotional. I want to talk about it from that lens. So what are miasms and how does that relate to homeopathy?
So essentially what a miasm is that we've got a distortion of energy up here with the ancestors, and it's passed on. It's transmuted through, the energetics that are passed on. So if we give an example of this, of what it actually looks like, this is where you're looking at the mice, and they've done these scientific sort of analyses where they will expose these mice to the scent of a cherry blossom. They let them smell it, and then they come in and they electroshock the mice. And then they come back in, they let them smell the same scent, they shock them again. And of course, doesn't take long before these mice smell that smell and they run around the cage frantic. They're petrified, they know what's coming. But what's interesting is when the offspring of those mice, the next generation, when they smell that scent, even though they have never been electroshocked, they go frantic and they repeat it again with the next generation of mice and again. The cherry blossom makes them go wild with panic. So what we're looking at there, it's this inherited ancestral baggage and trauma. And you look around at like us today. How many of us had parents or grandparents in wars, in like horrific situations? Abusive situations, and we're looking at all of this distorted energy that can come down through our family lines. And you don't just get it from that, you can also actually get it from drugging. So you've got the mental and emotional component, but then also what energy changes. Let's say a mother who's on the oral contraceptive pill for 20 years before she has kids. Those kids can actually inherit a miasm because mum has distorted her energy with drugs or whatever medical interventions they've done. It's all about energy. So the miasm is just acknowledging something has happened in the older generations that's been passed down. Now we want to find out what that is so we can put the offspring back into alignment energetically. So we have in homeopathy some very clear miasms, and one is the example of syphilis. Now, because syphilis was so rampant, it was so destructive of a disease. In the later stages of that disease, yes, you've got like the face is like rotted out and the body's eaten out with these ulcer type things, rotting, wounds. But mentally and emotionally, when you see them in the very later stages, it's almost like they're bridging between life and death. Like they become crazy creative sometimes, but they can be very self-destructive. So it seems like they're in one element extremely enlightened, close to God, crazy, hearing the voice of angels. And on the other side, they're like the total duality. It's like darkness, demonic, like they're rotting, they're killing their wives and doing crazy things. So what happens then to the children who don't have syphilis, but potentially going up our family lines? They had that sort of energy going on. So I can give you a real example. So my husband is Aboriginal Australian. And so in these Indigenous cultures, when syphilis came through, it was brought over to Australia with these colonizers, and it just wipes through and it hits them really hard. And so that energy that comes down the family lines, when you're a homeopath and you are looking for the syphilitic miasm, I'll give you some characteristics that are written about in our textbooks. Now, it would be history of severe mental health issues, whether it's bipolar, schizophrenia, deep, dark depression, a massive affinity for alcoholism. They crave the alcohol. Self-destructive. They can be very suicidal, a lot of suicides in the family, self-harm, self-sabotage. You can see the element of it. It's self-destructive. But you also see in these people often this brilliance, like this creativity. It's that duality of this remedy where it's like they are close to God and they can feel the energy of like other entities, and they can perceive, they have this psychic sense, very intuitive, that a lot of people have no access to. It's like the veil between this world and the spiritual world for them is very thin. So that can be a blessing or a curse depending how out of alignment you are, how strong that syphilitic miasm is. And so the other thing, and why I thought, I already thought that you had that miasm, when we were talking. But another thing that's
I'm so fucking crazy. I'm just kidding.
No, you're so enlightened, so brilliant. It's so funny because when I talk to people, I can pick up like
you can.
So much.
I mean, straight up, you could.
When we were in the car, and I asked you, like, are you left-handed? And you're like, I am. And it's like, that's a common in the syphilitic miasm. And it's almost like the brain just works differently. The hemispheres are different. So they can be prone to either being on the spectrum or a lot of it's like that neurodivergence. The brain's working differently. So there's much more higher prevalence of left-handedness in the syphilitic miasm. So my husband, he's also left-handed. His dad's left-handed. And when you look up his family history, it's very syphilitic. So there's a lot of suicides in the family, uncles, cousins, a lot of alcoholism, that real spiritual connected sense. Just heavy. Yeah. You also see the physical pathology of like heart issues. And Matt's grandfather had died in his 40s from a heart attack. And he was also an alcoholic. So it's like on both sides of his family, quite prevalent. And there's,
same with me, by the way, for that. So it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Like my grandpa has had multiple heart surgeries.
Yep. And that's because when you look at syphilis, the disease, what does it affect? The heart. Now we've got generations of people who, even though they don't have syphilis, that same energetic blueprint, it has hijacked their own, spirit, their field, and it's living out these pathologies. So that's what we need to address. And so Matt, he'd hurt his shoulder and he'd gone to a chiro, and the chiro's like, isn't your wife a homeopath? Can you get her to make you up like some arnica? And so he asked me for it, and I was like, sure. I said, actually, I've been wanting to try this other remedy on you too. I'm like, if you're willing to take it. He's like, yeah, sure. So it's funny because people would think, because I'm a homeopath, that I would treat everyone around for anything and everything. But it's like I really wait until, I don't know, it seems like, they wanted or, you really want to intervene. But I was like, I am curious about this with you because I know your family history. And so I give him a syphilinum in a Fibonacci homochord. So just quickly, for anyone who's listening and you're a homeopath or you understand homeopathy, when we're talking about the different frequencies, these are the numbers that are associated on the bottles of remedies that you get. And so it depends, like how diluted and succussed is it? It's like the power, the frequency. Now, the power of homeopathy is not only in finding the right remedy, you must find the right strength, because you need to be able to stimulate the body hard enough to cause a response. Many homeopaths are really messing up in the potency, the frequency that they're giving, so they're not getting the results that they should be. So it is important. When you combine them all in one, powerful stuff. And so I give him the homochord and I give it to him. And the next day I go to work and he calls me and he FaceTimes me. And I can see that he's crying when I answer the phone. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what's happened? I'm thinking either someone's died, something's wrong with the kids. And I'm like panicked. And he has never called me crying like in our life. And so we've been together for like 10 years and you've met him. He's like, just like a cool, chill guy. He's just like happy-go-lucky. And, but like stuff under the surface, but like really pretty regulated, good at communicating emotions, but would not just call me crying. And I'm like, what on earth is going on? And he literally just like goes into this conversation about, he's like, my dad, like, oh, it just would have been so hard for my dad. So what happened is Matt's dad was 21 and he goes into work one day And he can see this crowd like standing at the front of work. They work in the mines. And he's like, what's everyone crowding on? And he pushes to the front and he sees it's his dad who works with him on the floor having a heart attack.
So Matt's grandpa. So this Matt's dad seeing his, okay, got it.
And they revive him and he has another heart attack, and it sort of goes on like 5 times. He gets resuscitated ultimately to pass away. So you imagine what it feels like to be a 21-year-old guy watching your dad go through this. It's terrifying. It's like completely trauma.
Heartbreaking, you could call it.
Literally. And to his field, and he never processed any of that grief. He just stifled that straight down. And this is a common human behavior because it's like, I cannot process what I've just experienced. And children are really good at this. They just somatize it, we call it. The brain can't comprehend. I'm going to store that away in the body. And maybe if I'm lucky, I'll deal with it later in life. But, you know, Matt's dad, Dean, it's just like, whoop, there it goes under there. And then he conceived Matthew 2 years later. So you think all of the energy that was going on in his body when he then creates Matthew, of course it's going to transfer on. And so Matt calls it, and he's grieving. He's literally crying all of the tears that his dad never cried, never processed, because the grief was as active in him as it would be in his dad. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I realized, it's the remedy. I'm like, it's okay. So then we're sort of laughing and crying at the same time. And it's just powerful. And something else that he noticed is that when he would take the syphilinum, he would feel his heart like race and sort of felt like a fluttering kind of thing. And he's like, oh, this is crazy. And I had a fertility patient at the time, and she emailed me the day after Matt had this. And she said, and in her case taking, and the reason she was infertile was massively syphilitic backstory. So syphilinum was really well indicated. And she was like, it makes my heart kind of race. And she actually had these other symptoms come up. And she said, my hands are like seizing up, like it feels like they're arthritic. And I said, well, arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis is very common in the syphilitic miasm. And I said, it sounds like your body is rewiring the energetic circuits of like rheumatoid arthritis. And she emailed me back and she said, oh my gosh, that's so crazy. My grandma was in bed. She was bedridden from 30 years old because her rheumatoid arthritis was so severe, she couldn't walk. And so here is the granddaughter working out the energy distortion of the rheumatoid arthritis. So for a couple of days, my patient is feeling the rheumatoid arthritis. So it's common in homeopathy when you take a well-indicated remedy, all of these symptoms start to come up to be processed. But you see that a lot in the miasmatic prescriptions because you're processing not only your own baggage, you're working through the issues of your ancestors, the unresolved. That can be massively mentally and emotional traumas as well, that you actually start to process where these things came from. So that was Matt's experience on that. He's moving through. And when Matt's asking me, like, why is it making my heart race? And I would say, your grandfather died of a heart attack at 40. Obviously, there is a distortion of energy there that your body is now correcting. So,
and his dad having like a heartbreak, right?
Yeah,
Seeing his and then stuffing all that down
in that area.
Yeah.
So yeah, he really healed from that. And so we left that for a while. And more recently, I mean, do you want to talk about Aurum? Because it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So when you came over and you visited, and just from talking you and just like knowing sort of your backstory, I'm like, I'm pretty sure you have the syphilitic miasm running. So we want to clear that, but also Aurum. Now, Aurum is homeopathic gold. So they literally get a tiny little bit of gold. They take it in there and they dilute it and succuss it. So we want all of the energy from gold, but you're not actually ingesting the actual, dose of it. But it's all of that power, the vibration of gold. Now, what's funny is you go through our Materia Medica, our textbooks, and it gives you pages and pages and pages of information about the vibration of gold and what that looks like in the person when they have a distorted energy field. Now, your Aurums, they're often your leaders. They're brave, they're courageous. These are the leaders of the army, right? Self-sacrificial. They take a lot of responsibility. They take it as like, this is my personal duty. And if they fail in their duty, they have like massive anxiety of conscience. I have neglected my duty. And that can lead to deep, dark depression. They can be very prone to that. The Aurums, you know, the golden boy or whatever, you know, these colonels in the army who fail their duty, then they commit suicide because they can't live with that failing. So very prone to that flip side. And
fear of failure, essentially.
Massive. And so that obviously checks out with you. I was like,
very much.
I was like, I think you'd really benefit from this. And but what was funny at the time, I gave that to you however many months ago you were over. And like a month after you were gone, I was watching Maddie and he was watching this movie, and it was that USS Indianapolis. So we're talking about like, anyway, leaders who they sort of got Hiroshima, like got that atomic bomb, and he was trying to do his duty like to the army and like look after his men, and he felt that he had failed. And in the end, you know, in this documentary, he kills himself. He's like, I failed my duty, deep, dark depression, alcoholism, all this stuff. And Matt's watching this show and he's like, I can see he's very emotional about it. And I'm like, I can see in this movie that the guy's an Aurum. He's a complete and utter Aurum, but why are you crying about it? And then I'm like, come to think of it, why are the only movies that you ever get this emotional about, it's always the same theme? Even if it's like, we were watching one recently and it's like the lawyers who are fighting for what's right because it's just that moral obligation. It's that conscience. It's, I must, you know. And I was like, you always resonate with these Aurums. And I'm like, maybe you would do well with a prescription of it. And so I made him up a bottle and I was like, just see if this does something, because he doesn't actually, he's not as obvious as you, as that is his energy. But when you go back to his earlier life, like a lot of Aurums, they are the leaders, like maybe school captains, like good at like their sport. They're the golden boy. It's so funny. It's made out of gold because it's your classic golden boy. There's something a bit magnetic about them, and they're very responsible and just, you know, charismatic sort of leaders. And anyway, so I gave that to him, and again, like the syphilinum, a new wave of things, you know, just starts coming to the surface. And it's realizing that sort of more a classical, a constitutional level. Now we're not just looking at the ancestral things. Now I'm looking at my husband and the energy that he has actually carried his whole life. And I sat with the textbook with him and I went through like some of the symptoms that are characteristic, and hearing him explain, like, he's like, this is what I have felt like my entire life. And, you know, people sometimes don't realize the internal monologue or the energy and the subconscious things that these people carry. And it looks different for all Aurums. So like you and Matt, okay, yeah, you're both left-handed and have like some characteristics that you guys actually, when you were over and you guys are like laughing and like, I'm like, you guys are really similar. I'm like, you get on just fine. But you also would have a very unique experience of being an Aurum and what that looks like. But for Matt, it's been this sensation of like heaviness his whole life. So the people who maybe have even been prone to depression, like this black cloud, it's like they don't get to be just this spontaneous, fun, carefree, whatever. It's like they're weighted down with the level of responsibility that they feel.
Sounds like me a lot of the time. Would you this one say that? Yeah, Kylie's over off screen.
Yeah. It's a lot of duty to carry. So for him, he's like, I've felt this way since I was a kid, like this heaviness and depression, and going through then, you know, the different, and they can be really sensitive to criticism, and Aurum is massive for ailments from grief for whatever reason. And so I gave it to him, and I forgot about it. And he must have kept taking it, because I'm noticing he's like mentally, emotionally, he is like not acting like normal. Like he was sort of trying to pick fights with me, and he never does that. If we're going to have like an argument, it's because I've started something and then he comes back and argues with me. He would never just start an argument for no reason, but he was doing it. And I'm like, what is your problem? Why are you picking on me? And after 5 days, and then he cracks and he's like, I've been taking the Aurum, and he just like starts crying. I'm like, oh. I was like, why didn't you tell me? I forgot. And it's funny because especially when I work in fertility, I worked massively in fertility. So many
I want to talk
couples.
about that a lot too, because a lot of people today are struggling with fertility issues. Yeah.
And I always said to them, guys, I'm about to give you remedies that are going to bring up all of your childhood woundings, physically, mentally, emotionally. You're probably going to feel a bit unstable. And because you're both going through it at the same time, I'm going to ask you, show so much grace for each other, because what you're projecting, it's not about your husband or wife. If your dad was a prick, all this anger that's coming out, it's not directed at your husband. It's really, so just be aware of that.
Helpful context up front. Yeah.
And so, then he just, when he tells me that, and it's this like guttural sort of crying, like I've never seen him cry like that. It's like from the depths, like this sort of aching grief. And I'm like, whoa. And so we just like are sitting in the shower, and I just let it like keep coming. And the homeopath in me is like, yes, nailed it. I'm the best. And so it's like, wow. And it was things that he had no conscious memory in his waking life of it being an issue. If you had asked him how it felt like to have his dad work away in the mines a lot of his childhood, it was absolute heartbreaking grief to not have his dad around very much.
Right.
And here is a grown man, 35 years old, and he's crying like a 4-year-old child who's like, where's my dad?
Yeah.
And just watching it, I was like, wow. And he started to go over like all of these stories that I'd never heard. And they're seemingly sort of innocent things, like no big major revelation of traumas. It's like the grief of, dad being gone, the grief of like my auntie died, and then my cousins were left without a mum when they were so young, and like literally crying out all of these tears about things that as an adult, again, he didn't feel consciously sad about, but his spirit had all of these woundings over the years. And the aurum, it stimulated his vital force. It gave his body enough energy to get all of these things up and out. And this is so characteristic of homeopathic treatment, that everybody has this massive, it's so cleansing. It is so good for your health to get that stuff up and resolved and feel it. And then it like transmutes off and it's no longer an issue. So another example of that I see all the time is I've worked with so many people with a history of sexual abuse. It's sadly so extremely common. And when they take their remedy, often with sexual abuse, it was never appropriate for them to talk to anyone about it. So they have locked that down, but it's had this seething sort of anger and pain and humiliation and all these things. When they take their remedies, boy, it can like unleash rage at like, how dare you molest me? And they get this up and out, and people will say to me, I've been in talk therapy for 20 years. I have been talking over these same traumas for 20 years. And I took that homeopathic remedy and it was gone. It was gone. They're set free from the pain of what happened.
Which one was this? Which remedy specifically?
So it's common in a few. Lac-caninum is a massive one.
Is this a miasmic remedy? Or?
These ones are more classical constitution with sexual abuse specifically. So, you can have like lac-caninum, which is actually harnessed. It's the energy from dog's milk. And you see these people, they become revolted by their own body. They can get body dysmorphia, a self-loathing. They disconnect from their body. And it's very common in extreme trauma in childhood that they'll dissociate. But the problem is that sometimes they go through life then in this sort of state, like the lights are on, but no one's home. Actually had a high school best friend, and so sad. I wish I'd known at the time, but she was being molested by her stepdad, who at the time I thought he was so cool. Hang out, we slept over there all the time. I had no idea he was abusing her. And she actually was going to court, and she was like, I'm going to actually put you in jail. A lot of people don't actually go that far to get them in jail, but she was like, I'm going to do it. It took her 2 years. And it got to these final court hearings where she needed to get up and say her like final piece to actually get him convicted. And she messaged me, and I just graduated my course in homeopathy. And she's like, I need help. Like, she's like, I physically can't get out of bed. I can't compute. I can't talk. And she said to me, the lights are on, but nobody's home. And I'm so scared if I can't get to the court and say it, he's not going to get convicted. Wow. And in homeopathy, we have a remedy, opium. And when someone is actually under the influence of opium, you would know opioids, even general anesthetic, the lights are on, but no one's, they're not really in their body. So she was—
I've been on them a few times with surgery. That sounds very accurate.
Yeah. And we use the remedy opium. Some people have never been well since going under general anesthetic. They didn't come back, and their spirit didn't come back into their body properly.
Wild.
Also, ayahuasca. A lot of these things where people are leaving their body, they're not grounded anymore.
Yeah.
And so opium can help. But for her, during her sexual abuse, she would just black out, leave, which is common, right? It's like, I just don't want to be in this body. Bye. And when she took the opium, out of bed, goes to court, very clearly explains, and he goes to jail. So it's very powerful, that sort of the aspect. But yeah, getting these emotions out is just so important. And the thing about homeopathy that I love, right, because everyone hears these days, oh, you got to feel your feelings, you know? It's like, yeah, cool. Much easier said than done. Because, you know, you look at someone like my husband, or even you, since you've been taking your remedies and stuff's coming up and you're like, where and what is this? And it can be so subconscious. We have no awareness of it. We don't know what's locked away under there. We've had like a lifetime of little things here and there, but that's why homeopathy is so important. It just triggers it, and your body knows what it needs to get up and out. Now, some things it will just recalibrate in dreams. So it's very common in homeopathic treatment. As soon as someone starts taking a remedy, their dream life, they're like, oh my, I have not dreamt like this. And the spirit's just working everything out. Some things you'll be consciously aware of. Some things it can just do on its own. It doesn't really need your conscious awareness. It's just transmuting all that energy and pain out. So yeah, Maddie then is just going through this like, wow, the absolute depths of healing. And with Matt, he doesn't have physical pathology, you know, really to work on where we could see the change in that, except for heartburn. He was really susceptible to heartburn. So if he ate specific things, oh, he's like, oh no. And when he took the Aurum, he was having this physical purging, but he was thinking, holy crap, like what's going on? Is this my gallbladder? Immense pain around that region. He was so uncomfortable. He hardly ate for like 5 days then, keeping it so light, heaps of water. And once that passed, and he's eaten since, he's like, oh my gosh, I've got no heartburn. Like he could eat now anything, orange juice or a pastry, and he's got no heartburn. So it recalibrated whatever it was that was going on, the reason for that heartburn, that was cleared with the emotional stuff as well.
Wow. I don't remember if it was syphilinum or aurum, because I'm also taking both, and I know Maddie is taking both as well, that you have seen in Maddie the sort of results are that he also feels very nostalgic and is very sad about time passing and is like crying over your kids and stuff like that. That's what's come up in me a lot.
Which is so funny. I will get
like Kylie has stopped me on a number of occasions. Like, what, are you okay? Because I'll just like think about how my daughter just turned 4 and then just start bawling my eyes out, or just like sit with my daughter on my lap and look at her, or like look at my son and he'll look at me a certain way and then start crying. And that happened pretty strongly over like a 6-7 day period. And again, the only change was that I was taking these remedies. So
and we'll have to look in the books and see whether it's over. But when you think of Aurum, right, there is a lot of grief, suppressed
That's
grief.
What I was thinking, is that it's Aurum.
Grief, And for Matt, he is literally exactly the same as you. And so like we have to sleep at night with like our kids in the bed. Like he has to have them in his arms, because it's like this holding on to this moment. Because if he looks at photos of like our kids as babies, he will cry.
I'm about to start crying right now.
Yeah, it's just such a vibrational thing, just hold. And it's so much love, right? It's so intense that it hurts him that they're growing up. So it's exactly the same. So I'd say it's
definitely the Aurum. Like I feel into it right now. It's definitely the Aurum, because it especially relates to like your duty of being a leader, you know, as a dad.
And also then, and we wonder, okay, with it coming up, so with Matt, it's like, have I been a good enough dad? Have I been present enough with them? Did I give it everything? Because the Aurums, they have such expectations of themselves. You've got other dads who are way less involved, and they're like, I'm sweet.
Damn it, Mel.
Yeah. It's the Aurum. It's my sense of duty to just love them so intensely.
Yeah, definitely the Aurum. Oh man. Hold on. Well, it's not helping that Kylie's here and she's off camera crying too.
And it's so intense, right? And so when we're taking the Aurum, it's bringing back into the person that, like, yes, you are enough. And so you will still always have this tendency. We're not going to change your constitutional aspect, your personality that makes you always a high achiever and wanting to do well. But when you give the remedy, we get to let go of the aspects of that remedy that hold us back. We don't want the Aurums feeling this sense of guilt throughout their life for not having done enough. Like, you know, the power of the field. What does guilt do to it?
Oh my gosh.
Good. And
contracts it.
Contracts. And so you let that go, and this I am enoughness. And every single remedy picture, we all have our own unique distortions of how it actually manifests in our behavior, how we adapt to deal with the things that we feel. But ultimately, the best thing about homeopathy is breaking those chains of what has held us back, why we have cut ourselves off from this absolute, at the core, self-love. Just existing is enough. It's good. So it's a beautiful thing just to see people break those chains and just set free, really.
Yeah. I was thinking, as you were saying, like, how when the sperm meets the egg, you see that sort of flash of light that occurs, and that's like the life force, the soul entering into that being that is then being created in the womb, and how energetically these sort of imprints are passed down through the waters of our bodies generationally. So like the raw materials for the body that are being created are taking the energetic imprint of the mom and all that they were exposed to, and then their parents and their parents' parents, and so on and so on, and then also on the dad's side of things. And those raw materials are going into creating this amalgamation of the two with, you know, if you believe in past lives, whether or not you believe in past lives or not, just the individuated energetic imprint of that soul also coming into the mix. So it's like, I don't want to call it a battle, but we're in this constant dance from the time that we are then born between those things that are imprinted into the waters of our body based on being an amalgamation of our mom and our dad, but then also our individuated soul. And essentially what homeopathy is doing is getting you back to the true essence of your soul when you're dealing with these miasmatic sort of things with respect to homeopathy. Does that sound right?
Who am I without all of the baggage that's not me? All the things that I've picked up, all the things that I've inherited. Who am I? Like, and we're all individual and here to like radiate and here with purpose. And this is something I love about the old homeopaths and Samuel Hahnemann. Man, he wrote so beautifully. You read books and paragraphs and you can feel like the soul of this man. But his aim in homeopathy back then, it wasn't just to get rid of physical disease. It was to allow man to achieve his individual highest calling. What did he come to earth to achieve? Because anything that is blocking you from that needs to be removed. So your fear of failure, you know, even financial issues. People don't realize that even this poverty mentality, I'll never have enough, that is vibrational. And you can move that with homeopathy. People have got vibrational patterns going that they just learned, you know, it's like a program. You're young, up to the age of 7, brain's in a theta state. You're absorbing it all, but you can rewire that. It doesn't have to be your story. Alchemize out anything that doesn't serve you. And you want to create this life that you dream of. And I feel in our circles, you know, we're around a lot of people who we are dreaming of this new world that we want to create. We feel it. We know it's possible. We know what it would feel like to be in that. That's what I love. Like, you encourage your audience to use the power of vibration to create. It's a God-given ability to create, but it is vibrational. So it doesn't matter what you think or what you say. You can say, okay, I'm gonna be rich. I'm gonna be successful. You can say these things, but if your vibration does not reflect that, you will not be able to achieve it. It's as a man believes in his heart. The heart is the center of that vibrational output. And so homeopathy allows people to believe in their heart, their worth. And I watch with my patients their life transform in the ways that they didn't expect. So yeah, we get rid of the eczema, we get rid of the asthma, their endometriosis. Cool. They were probably expecting that. but it's the relationship dynamic that completely changes. It's the boss that stops bullying you all of a sudden. And it's the opportunities that come into your life and you think, what the hell? We as human beings are constantly emitting and receiving these vibrations. And so we attract in what we are reflecting. And so homeopathy completely changes your field. And then the people around you respond to that. Mm-hmm. Your kids respond to that. And it's amazing. And so this is why, I'm so passionate about sharing homeopathy with people, because if we really want to create this new earth, we must let go of all this old baggage that holds us back. And I don't think people can just muscle their way into it like the power of the mind. Some people get breakthroughs, right? Like they might get up every day and they might meditate for an hour and they're really trying. And a lot of people can make quantum leaps and they can get brain, heart coherence, stuff like that. Homeopathy is just so much faster. It is so much faster. I know I've, again, worked with people who they've done like dispensers and they every morning are meditating like 2 hours and still I give them a remedy. And it's like, holy crap. Mm-hmm. They already got gains through these other ways and they became conscious and had other awareness. Mm-hmm. But it's the transition, when we talk alchemy, going from the caterpillar to the butterfly, the homeopathy speeds up that process 100-fold. So use it to become the person that you want to be and start attracting this life. And what I find about people who are vibrationally in alignment, something that I love and I've noticed, is that they become more like that Christ energy. They naturally want to do good to others. They naturally want to breathe life into others, their dreams. They want children to be loved and nurtured. And it is not this like, I'm creating this life for myself. They have this real community mindset of we all benefit because we are all linked. To do good to you, it does good to me because it's this whole system. And so the more people who use homeopathy and realize that, like about humanity, it gives you this love of what it is to be human that a lot of people have disconnected from. They're stuck in this mentality of that more competition. They've forgotten that cooperation is what they really want. Community is what they seek more than any financial material. So I love that.
Most of us already know Shilajit is powerful. It's been used for thousands of years for energy, mental clarity, and overall vitality. But here's the problem. Most companies offering Shilajit are cutting corners. They're using fillers, skipping proper testing, and even hiding heavy metals like lead and arsenic behind fancy marketing and Instagram influencers. Dr. Andy Kaufman saw this happening and decided enough was enough. As an MIT biology graduate and tireless advocate for health freedom, he spent years researching and testing dozens of different Shilajit sources. And what he found was shocking: widespread contamination, fake lab reports, and murky supply chains everywhere he looked. And in response, he decided to create his own Shilajit, Authentica Shilajit, sourced from over 16,000 feet in the Himalayas, rigorously tested for purity, and backed by complete transparency. No fillers, no mystery ingredients, just the real deal. Shilajit you can actually trust and feel from the first serving. And listen, out of all the natural health doctors out there, Dr. Andy Kaufman is one of the most brilliant, in-depth researchers I know. If he recommends something, I'm definitely going to pay more attention. So if you're taking Shilajit already but have that gut feeling that something's just off, you're probably right. Trust that instinct and check out medauthentica.com/way forward, or just head to the show notes and be sure to use code way forward for 10% off your first order. Hey y'all, I'm here with Melissa Kupsch from RMDY Academy of Homeopathy. We are so stoked here at the Way Forward to be partnering with Melissa and RMDY in order to spread the message of homeopathy across the world, and also to partner on the eventual development of healing centers across the United States.
People are pretty quickly coming to realize that frequency is the future of medicine. We are witnessing the great resurgence of homeopathy right now. We're really moving away from that suppressive medical model. Whether it's for eczema, asthma, hormones, fertility, anxiety, depression, trauma, whatever it is, it all starts as energy in the person's field first. If we change our field, we can completely change our life. Our 2-year academy is open worldwide to anyone who wants to become a homeopath. We've got 5 lecturers and we currently have over 500 students enrolled, which is record numbers in our field. A career in homeopathy is amazing for anyone who wants flexibility in their work and who wants to be valuable in creating this new world. We have stay-at-home parents enrolled, we have ex-medical professionals, grandparents signed up who want to learn how to heal their grandchildren and pass on that invaluable knowledge. We even have husband and wife teams. So my husband enrolled in the course with no prior knowledge of health as a background, and he is loving it.
Kylie is also enrolled as well, so my partner is, and she's so stoked to become a homeopath and to be helping to spread this message across the world.
The thing that we hear from so many of our students is, I found my thing. Homeopathy is the key. We harness frequencies from nature and we alter the field of all creations. So if anybody wants to join us or they want to know more about it, they can visit our website.
Yeah, and all that information will be in the show notes. So if you want to learn more about RMDY Academy, also RMDY Collective, also some of the homeopathic products that they have, please just head to the show notes. All of that will be listed there. I love what you said there about the heart, because I've been just thinking so much lately, especially after interviewing this guy named Dr. Stephen Hussey on the heart and how the heart is not a pump, it's a vortexing device. That is such a rabbit hole that's pretty incredible. But what's cool about it is that I've sort of come to the position that, as we know, the heart produces the strongest electromagnetic field of all the organs in the body. I'd be really interested to see how they actually individually measured that, but let's assume that that's true. I think that our biofield is an amalgamation of all the individual fields of the various parts of our body, of which the heart is the strongest one. And it's cool how various religious and spiritual traditions talk about the heart being the seat of the soul. I mean, I think the heart's mentioned over 900 times in the Bible, for example. And healing, transformation happens both individually in familial units and communities collectively across the earth, even when we can really pull our awareness from our head into our heart, and not in a like new agey type of way and not in an intellectualized type of way, but truly pull our awareness back into here, because then we're accessing the field that is much more expansive and much more potent as part of our bodies. And I think it's because the heart is quite literally the seat of the soul. So it's like we're accessing the essence of our soul in that act. And that's kind of what you're talking about with homeopathy, really just helps facilitate that, especially in this sort of miasmatic, is that the right word? Miasmatic sort of approach to it, and understanding the intergenerational, the energetic, the emotional, the psychospiritual elements of who and what we are, and how homeopathy can help facilitate us coming back and connecting with that.
Yeah, that's it. And it's like when they measure the output of the heart and that field, it's so far away that they can perceive, you know, these electromagnetic like waves out there. And so you think, when we are in alignment and we are working from the heart, what impact we have on our own families in that house, such a close proximity. And this is why, and probably something we should chat about, is how sometimes we give a remedy to a child that the grandparent needed. And we see that even when that child takes the remedy, that grandparent has physical manifestation symptoms going on. And it's this quantum link that comes down family lines. But it's remarkable. Hilary Dorian, she's quite a famous homeopath, and she was teaching in our academy recently, and she said, I love homeopathy for its ability to reach into the past and change it and just restructure like the entire future. And it's this quantum, we're not limited by space or time. So it's like these traumas get completely recalibrated. But yeah, when giving a remedy to, so I had an example, I'll tell you quickly, of a little girl, and she was doing really attention-seeking behavior, like promiscuous, sort of like full-on attention-seeking, like eating and doing compulsive. She had some like compulsive tics going on, and originally I was treating her for eczema, and after like the third consult, the mum said, look, I have to tell you something, to be honest. I can't stand her. Like, she's my daughter and I can't stand her because she reminds me so much of my mother. Wow. And I said, okay. And I said, what's the same? Tell me. And then she goes into this explanation about her mum, massively attention seeking, promiscuous, wanting attention from anyone for any reason. So like she goes to the doctor's office, not because she's actually scared she has a disease and she's like a hypochondriac, but just for the attention to come home and, oh, I had to go and do that. And just the family just like couldn't stand it. She was so pathological. And the remedy was hyoscyamus. And in hyoscyamus, you often see that there's a lack of attention going from the dad energy usually. And her dad died in a war, very young. And so then she's, as an adaptation to that lack of attention, well, then she's going to try and seek it anywhere with all sorts of compulsive and sort of seemingly ridiculous things that she was doing. And then here is this child who's manifesting the distorted energy of her grandmother. And when giving that to the child, that grandmother then sort of reached out to her daughter and they'd been cut off. You know, she was so bad that the daughter's like, just don't come near me and my family, it's too much. And she had massive transformation through the work of the granddaughter taking that remedy. And she stayed on hyoscyamus, that girl, for maybe 4 months. And the mum messages me and she's like, I have an actual new child and I love her. And she could feel that love and express it now. And it was remarkable. She said she just grew up overnight. Like, it was the immature things that she was doing before. She has now blossomed into this just like beautiful girl. And so, yeah, the power of it to affect the generations. Because when I was younger, I used to hear people saying like, oh yeah, I'm doing the work. I'm clearing the generational curses and da, da, da. And I used to think that was like a lame thing that people would say. I'm like, okay, you got issues. But when I see it in homeopathy, I'm like, yeah, you're just breaking those chains off, like for your benefit, but for those too. And so when we have, let's say, our complex kids, autism, pandas, PANS, ADHD, any of these complex, like neurological sort of things that we see really prevalent at the moment, we will always look to the parents as well and want to treat them because we know your field with your child is very like inextricably linked, especially the mother and the children, like up to the age of 7. Like you grew them, you know, you were one flesh with these babies for a long time. So if the mother works through her own issues, the child often no longer has reason to be working through those issues. You can catapult your child's healing, like really escalate it up. So it is great when, you know, you do the work to help out the other people in the bloodline. I mean, you know, the work that you do and you explain like the field and like say the eggs, like, and when you surround yourself with this energy, you can be brought up by people who are, and like what a beautiful thing that as humans, our fields do try to help each other heal. What a like beautiful thing to do.
Yeah, it's incredible. Strong coherent field overtakes and trains weaker incoherent fields. So the more that you work on yourself, you're helping to entrain and uplift those around you. Even if they're like across distances, even if they might already be dead, like it's creating this sort of field effect. Yeah, it's incredible. What are some of the other common miasms? I know carcinosin is one that we haven't gotten into yet. Let's discuss that, I guess, first.
Yeah. So carcinosin, like the name, born out of this cancer miasm. So you can see why it's an extremely important miasm that we understand these days, because how many people are being diagnosed with cancer? It's outrageous. Yeah. And so we need to really look at what is the energy that is leading to the body manifesting these symptoms, because they're just symptoms, but we want to know why. What is causing the body to do that? Now, the real essence of the carcinosin miasm, what leads to cancer, is tolerating the intolerable. That's, you know, quite a key essence of it. So what you'll see when you take a lot of these patients is that in their early childhood, there was some sort of nervous system dysfunction, whether there was an alcoholic parent and the child's in fight or flight, or a really dominating. I see this in a lot of super religious families where the child had a lot of high expectations put on them. You need to be perfect. Don't put a foot out of line. That's a lot of pressure for a kid to live up to. And so they can manifest a lot of the times these perfectionist OCD tendencies, trying to like control the outer world to really calm their inner anxieties, and so that nervous system dysfunction. Now, what's really quite common, and I'll speak to like the common presentation of carcinosin that I see, but there are lots of different flavors of carcinosin as well, but the really common one is then they get into like high school, and extremely common around women, they get Epstein-Barr virus, right? And it's not that they've caught it from somebody. This is the body kicking up because it can no longer tolerate the amount of stress that it's under. So really common in school, because not only are they probably having troubles at home and with their own, mental and emotional aspects and their anxieties, but then you've got the stress of school and those sorts of relationships, and it's a big confounding thing. And so then they have this chronic fatigue, and a lot of them get wiped out with it. They might be bedridden, for a month. Some of them lose like 10 kilos and they're very sick. And then what looks like what people would call, it's just the viral load, right? And it's manifesting, but it's actually that the field is compromised. Then these women are the ones who are saying Lyme's, mold, co-infections, parasites. And we have to ask, why are they so susceptible? Because I'm not negating that, yes, you are being affected by these things. Why are they more likely and susceptible to vaccine damage, which they are? Mm-hmm. But it's because their constitution is already weakened because of the field. And it sometimes is just the field that they've inherited. So in the families, when I'm looking and they have the history of like marked history of cancer, all my aunties, uncles, there's breast cancer, there's this, there's that. And it's like the energy in your family, it was already wired that way. So, some other things, if you read through the books about this miasm, what some of these girls will go through, extremely self-critical. They turn it on themselves. Body dysmorphia, I've got to be perfect. It's like they have a level of perfection in their head that's often not attainable. And I see it with a lot of, say influencers, and it's so curated and they can't stop it. You could say to a carcinosin, like, you're really sick. You're at risk of this like major disease. You need to chill out and just relax and enjoy life. But their energy is so pent up. It's impossible for them to change it. They don't know what that looks like to actually be content and chill. And they are prone to, things like amenorrhea. Their periods might start to skip. Big fertility remedy, carcinosin. Anorexia. I can't imagine how hospital systems would change if you had homeopaths in there treating the anorexia, all of that sort of stuff, because it's beyond their comprehension. These doctors are saying to them, if you don't eat, you're going to die. And they don't want to die, but they can't get out of this energetic cycle. They're so stuck. So yeah, the carcinosin then, they also tend to attract situations of either bullying or like abuse, sort of like a doormat thing. So they're your classic people pleasers. So sometimes it can be in relationships, they'll be dominated by a husband, or at work, they'll be bullied, or in some sort of relationships, at school, they're picked on. And again, it's that vital force vibration that they're attracting of tolerating the intolerable. And at some point, the body just has to give out. And what we would say is that if it can't tolerate living anymore, it's like just too much. What does the body do? Well, it's almost like, let's get out of here then. Like very sad. People don't consciously realize what they're doing when they're living a life that's so not on purpose. And it's like their soul is so crippled. They can't speak their truth. Now, your carcinosins have classic thyroid dysfunction, real affinity for the thyroid. But we know like they're so blocked up in this region. They can't speak their truth. They can't be who they came here to be. They're being stifled. And that is so toxic, to not feel safe to express yourself. So what happens when we give carcinosin then? Now, what's interesting is that in those first couple of days, because the carcinosins are really prone to, when they were kids, recurrent tonsillitis, right? The immune system's like completely dysregulated. So it's flagging all of these toxins in their body, and medicine often then led to either lots of antibiotics or eventually just cutting out the tonsils, our little alarm bell system. So you don't get rid of the fire, you're literally just turning off the alarm now. But when they take the remedy, we see in homeopathy the return of old symptoms like we were talking about. Now, how do you know that you've given a good prescription that's resonating with them? Is that you will start to see issues that they used to have resurface. So they might not have had tonsillitis since they were a kid, and yet they feel like, oh my gosh, it feels like in this region, I feel like my tonsils are like swollen. And the homeopath will let them know, look, you're not actually getting tonsillitis, but your body is going to revisit all of the issues that you once had, because it's energetically, it's really getting to the root and it's really recalibrating it, because the antibiotics never really got rid of it.
Exactly.
I had a carcinosin patient recently, and she actually developed a tumor. She's young. She's like in her early 30s, and she had a tumor cut out. When she took the carcinosin, she said it was spasming in the region where I had the tumor cut out.
Wow.
And the body's going back there. It's got work to do. There's some distorted energy there. Even though she's already cut it out, the body's like, hey, what's going on here? Let's rewire that energy. So they get the return of those symptoms. And they might also cry, because a lot of them have tolerated a lot of crap their whole life. And some of them will actually get a bit angry. A lot of my carcinosins are the ones who actually quit their job. They're like, I have been in this soul-destroying job that doesn't light me up, and they just quit. And before the remedy, they could never imagine quitting and seeking something else. But it's very common. They will leave toxic relationships because, again, your vital force, your field, it's so intelligent that when you stimulate it, it will no longer let you. It would just feel impossible to stay in a situation that stifles you. And so they're just like, I'm leaving. And without the remedy, they would never have thought they could do that. So they're the common things that you see. Changes in menstrual cycles, really common with homeopathy. And again, it's just that all over, because you're a whole system. I'm not trying to target just your chronic fatigue that you've got going on, or like the Lyme's and all of these co-infections. I'm treating you, the whole person. So everything is going to get better. That carcinosin patient with the tumor, she also had the history of the perioral dermatitis. And when she takes the right remedy, it's like, oh crap, it feels like it's coming up. I can see little blotches. And, the body, it's revisiting it. Something in mainstream medicine is that when the children come in with eczema, they will often be prescribed steroids, the steroid creams. And again, it doesn't cure the eczema. You are forcing that distorted energy further inward. Now, the human organism, it needs its modes of expression. So the skin, like we said, is a really superficial, safe place to put it. But of course, it's really difficult for babies. Like any mother who's had a kid with eczema, like it can be traumatic.
Right.
Like they're itching, they're scratching, they're not sleeping. It's rough. But when you suppress it with steroids, a common thing that happens is they then develop asthma. So that distorted energy has gone into the lungs, which is also like a second skin. So then it's in there. When a child comes to me with asthma and I give them the correct remedy, what we often see is the return of old symptoms. Their asthma goes away, their eczema comes back.
Wow.
It heals from the inside out, from the most important organs to the less important organs. So if you have asthma and you are then taking all of your steroids, your long-acting steroids, what you often see is mentally and emotionally they become compromised. A big thing with steroid use is also ADHD, but also you can see in kids they can get aggressive. They're not acting like themselves. It's because you are continually cutting off the body's mode of expression.
Right.
The distortion of energy, it's got nowhere else to go and goes up that hierarchy to some really valuable organs. The lungs, it's dangerous to have asthma and be compromised. People die from asthma. Eczema is more superficial. So, you give that carcinosin to the person with asthma, the eczema comes back, but it doesn't stop there. Then the eczema heals because we really got to the root of the distorted energy. So it is powerful. But that carcinosin, it's as big as syphilitum. They're two of my favorites.
Can you share the experience that you had with taking the remedy for the HPV shot? Because that's another really good example of what you're talking about that you experienced personally.
Yep.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about homeopathic detox, what is our goal, right? Like cures like, we want to mirror up to the body the toxic substance that caused an assault to our body in the first time. So in the case of the HPV, Gardasil vaccine, I'd gotten that in school. Now, I never had any obvious symptoms from it that some people do get. But, I went on, fertility was fine, cycles were fine. I never thought it was an issue. And then I'm making up the remedy for a patient who had issues from the Gardasil shot. And I thought, why not, right? So I take a dose of that HPV detox remedy and I think literally nothing of it. And I go to bed that night and I wake up in the morning and I'm pulling on my nightgown. And I say to my husband, oh my gosh, my arm. I said, it feels like I've just had and I was like, oh my gosh, my arm is dead and it's at the exact vaccine entry point on my arm.
Wow.
And I was like, no. And it went through that day and it remained numb for nearly 3 days. I could feel that. And I touched base with another homeopath who specializes in vaccine detox, Dr. Isaac Golden. So he did his thesis on homeoprophylaxis. So that's using homeopathy to prevent any infectious diseases or whatever could spread through. But also by virtue of his work, you can imagine he attracts a lot of people who've had issues with vaccines. And I touched base with him and he said because of the neurological sort of aspect as well, a lot of people had paralysis from the vaccine. He said it's not uncommon. I was like, oh my gosh. And that really highlighted to me that even 20 years after getting that vaccine, my body remembered that assault and it was able to trigger a detox response. My next menstrual cycle was different to how it had been for the last however many years. And I would say my body then was just activated. It was recalibrating things. And I'm just like, wow, powerful. We had a nurse recently and we took her case. She's a US nurse actually. And we took her case for the academy, just showcase for students. This is exactly what we do and this is how we do it. And interestingly, during the COVID time, she was resistant. She's like, I'm not getting the shot. I'm not. And in the end, though, she said, all right, okay, how about this? I'll get the flu jab then to sort of placate them, bless her soul. And it triggered in her a massive cascade of issues. And up until we did the appointment with her, I don't think she actually realized that it was from the flu jab. It wasn't until, we are like medical detectives and we're going through and we say, okay, so you got this in September and by November, you're telling me that your entire body is covered in hives 80% of the time. So if she was to pick up a grocery bag and just put it on her shoulder, she would break out in painful hives all over anything that got touched.
Wow.
And her body was extremely heightened, very sensitive, very painful. And she had exhausted the medical route. So I don't know how your insurance works over here, but she's like thousands upon thousands of dollars trying to get testing and trying to understand what to do. She was on antihistamines, like very high doses, trying to get to the root of this issue. So what we prescribed for her was 2 remedies. They're called Thuya and Medorrhinum. Thuya is the biggest homeopathic remedy when it comes to vaccinosis, that sort of related issues from that. And it triggers like a good detox. Like Thuya is another good detoxing remedy. We gave her that daily and we checked in with her 12 weeks later and it was 80% cured. Literally just from those doses morning and night. She was sitting in front of us and she's like, let me show you. She takes her jumper off and she's like, look at my skin. Like it's not covered. She's like, I can pick things up. I can do anything. And so the power of homeopathy to undo and detox the assaults that it has experienced, it's incredible, right? Because if you go functional medicine, it's all about, we got to bind, we got to detox, and it seems like this endless loop for a lot of people.
Totally.
But what we can do energetically is mirror up to the body. What was the original assault? And the body will do the work. And for her, it's incredible. So she said, we just said, okay, great. It's been 12 weeks, continue. We expect complete recovery from this issue. So homeopathy is able to, I guess forgive a lot of sins. I love being a homeopath because It's like you don't have to live in this realm of like absolute perfection. You know, we can tolerate, you know, some toxic load. You do your absolute best and let your energy do the rest. It's powerful. I think there's somewhere in the Bible it even talks about, you know, the power of the mind. You know, you can overcome drinking poison. And it is true. You know, you see in these people the power of vibration. It's like you can literally transmute it out and it stops affecting the body. So very good on detox. I had a fertility patient, a gentleman, and his ADHD was so severe. He would need like an alarm to go off every 15 minutes to remind him, where are you and what are you meant to be doing? Like it was so severe, like crippling. And he had used a lot of steroids, severe use of steroids, because he'd had open heart surgery as a young boy. And when I gave him the steroid detox remedies, so what we do then is we get the steroids, we take them into the homeopathic pharmacy, dilute, succuss, we feed it back, the energy to his body. And he said to me, I can't take this remedy. It is causing me to be just like lifeless. Like I can't move. I'm on the couch. I'm like completely zombified, numb. And he's so scary. So I don't want to be around my kids. And I was like, okay, all right, stop taking it. I'll give you another one and then we'll go back to it. So I did another one, get his liver a bit better.
On that point, though, did you just stop him because he requested it and you're like having to think for his life, his family, all those other things? Because it's not that it was causing any weird contraindications. This is showing that the remedy's working. But it's like, okay, this is not going to suit his lifestyle right now. So we need to figure out a different approach with this.
Exactly.
Okay. And that's a really important point. That's a really important point because with even other natural approaches, I have these conversations with my friends all the time who've come to the same terrain-based health perspective as me. It's like, how do you distinguish between a detox reaction and no, you're just being poisoned more, especially when it comes to people doing some of these more aggressive approaches to detox, let's say, right? With this, because it's working on an energetic level and you're not actually getting any chemical constituents of the substance, you're just getting the energetic imprint of it. There is no contraindications. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. Yeah, there's none with homeopathy.
We are working with your body's own intelligent force. I am not forcing your body to release sequestered heavy metals that it had hiding in the bones. I honestly steer away from those sorts of heavy-handed, forceful ways of causing, you know, a detox response. Especially because I can do it homeopathically. So why would I, you know?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt on that. It's just, I think that's a very important point.
Yeah, and it's interesting in our academy because I say, you know, when we are looking at what do we call like an aggravation, right? Like where it stirred things up for someone. And I'm really particular about what is an aggravation really, because I only call an aggravation when the patient says to me, it's too much for me. Because as a practitioner, I would never say to someone, like, this is the only way, you got to keep going. Never. If they literally say to me, but he would be one of maybe 3 people in my entire career who's ever asked me to change it. Everyone else has the education level of just like understanding rather that this is good for me. So even though it gets rocky as crap, they are like, yes, this is working. This is recalibrating. Healing. And so they're really happy. But yeah, it definitely scared him. But what's interesting is that when we got back on and we cleared it, his ADHD completely resolved.
Wow.
So, you know, people are going around with these like diagnoses of what they think is wrong with them in their brain. Sometimes it's toxicity or a lingering, you know, effect from a drug that is still impacting you 20 years after the fact, because he only had them as a teenager. So you clear that steroidal suppression and then your brain cognitively, you don't have the brain fog and sort of that really monkey mind going on. So extremely powerful.
Is there any more generic remedies that you can think of that you recommend people take just to maintain internal coherence at all times, irrespective of what's going on?
So the only way homeopathy can work is if it finds resonance with the person. So some people will ask, is there just a remedy that I should take, you know, like a multivitamin, just like a pep in my step? And the truth is, for every individual, your philosopher's stone, if you will, like your one that's going to let you live to 115 years old with no chronic diseases, it's your similimum. Now, this is in homeopathy where we say, I have taken your whole case. I have looked at your whole energy and I have found it all fits into this one remedy. That's your simillimum. That's the one that will bolster the person.
How hard is it to find that, though, for someone?
These days, because of the level of suppression with drugs and it's
complexity
difficult.
regarding how many non-native EMFs, toxins, all these things we're exposed to,
Yep.
taking all those into account, some known, some unknown.
And when you compare the Western world and treating disease here versus going somewhere that is quite untouched, you see their vital force. And you hear homeopaths talk about stories, and it's like, I was treating someone with, one of the famous homeopaths, he had tuberculosis. So he didn't know about homeopathy. He was actually an MD, and this guy's name's Bonninghausen, and he's written a lot of texts for us since. But at the time, he was just a medical doctor. And he wrote a letter to his friend who was also a doctor, and he said, bad news, I am dying. I just wanted to write you a letter and say farewell. And the guy responded and said, I've been studying this new thing called homeopathy. You probably haven't heard of it yet, but tell me what your symptoms are, and I'll see. Maybe we can do something. And he completely cured his tuberculosis. And of course, you have your own experience of it. You go on devoted to it. And Bonninghausen was a huge homeopath. But he was cured using, I think, 2 doses of a homeopathic remedy, 2 remedies, but only 2 doses. And it was complete and rapid cure. And in this day and age, because our energy has become so distorted, homeopaths have to adapt, and you have to be more liberal in your prescribing because, again, we must match the intensity of the distorted energy.
Because otherwise, if not, the remedy's not going to do anything, right?
It bounces off.
Yeah.
And I've had people come to me who've seen other homeopaths and they were given a remedy and nothing happened. There was no movement. And what happened is it's the prescribing style. These people are still prescribing as if they're living in the 1800s when it's different now, so I'm much more liberal. I want to see physical changes, mental, emotional changes, all within the first 12 weeks. And if that's not happening, I know I've got the wrong remedy, so I need to adapt. But yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned something related to the vital force of the people that aren't as exposed to modernity. I think that's where you're going. Can you finish that? Because I'm super intrigued in my mind.
As in sort of how pure their vital force is, because
it's much easier to treat them. That makes a lot of sense because they have less muck around them.
And so you see the true essence of the organism, that more constitutional, the depths of who they are. You're not seeing this distorted layer because of the drugs that they took. So you've got some homeopaths like George Filthoukas, and he says in these little village communities of Greece where he works, it's very easy to find the simillimum, and that really strikes the chord for these people. Homeopaths these days, they have their work cut out for them. Mm-hmm. And you have to imagine too, right? So when people come in to tell you what their issues are, they're going to tell it through their lens and their understanding. And sometimes people are completely unaware of their own issues.
Totally.
And they really can't see it. So as a homeopath, I'm looking at all the clues, everything. It takes 90 minutes, and I want to know your relationship with your mum, your dad, how'd you feel in school, what physical things were going on. Okay, because you can make correlations. And as a homeopath, if I only look at someone's physicals, I've got a pretty good guess about what happened mentally and emotionally in terms of trauma. And I'll know where and when something happened. But of course, I want to ask and get real clarity on it.
Pattern recognition in many ways, right?
You do.
Yeah.
You see enough of these cases. For example, in the ones of sexual abuse, I can tell that there was abuse 99% of the time before they tell me. Mm-hmm. So the body gives its little tells of energy distortion, but sometimes it really takes time with someone before they tell me this critical piece, and it just unlocks the puzzle and I go, oh, there it is. So when you're working with a homeopath, definitely sometimes they'll nail it straight up, but more often it takes a bit of back and forward, because when you give a remedy that's close but not that one single simillimum, you're still going to see really positive benefit, because again, it's just like curing like. Right. So if you've picked a remedy that has a lot of commonalities, but it's just slightly similar, but it's not bang on, you can still see massive healing, massive improvement. And this sort of approach in homeopathy, it's almost like a zigzag to cure. You know, you're taking this layer, you're taking here, you're getting closer and closer. Symptoms are disappearing. They're constantly lightening that energetic load. So there's more ways than just prescribing, you know, the miasmatic and the simillimum. So homeopaths, it's funny, we go to conferences. So I was just in a conference in LA and they'll present these cases. And if you were to ask the whole room, what would you do for this exact case? You'd be divided, you know, in what, not everyone's going to pick the same remedy or the same potency, but they've got the common themes. So, you know, a lot of people, you all get success with the case, but you can go about it in different ways. But yeah, you hit a simillimum and you see that return of old symptoms. It's like, it's the most beautiful thing to watch unfold.
Amazing. What are some of the other miasms, just like as a quick question?
So the 5 dominant ones, tuberculosis, that was a massive one that affected people. So when you see people under the influence of the tubercular miasm, they often have your allergic constitutions, asthma, you know, and they can tend to be these people who love and like emotionally, the tuberculosis sort of aspect, they were displaced. A lot of them traveled, you know, to escape. And so they're living in places that are not like their homeland. And they tend to have in their personality traits, these are your like romantic wanderers, people who never feel settled and grounded. They
More
are constantly
nomadic type people?
Yes,
Wow.
yes. Ones who aren't rooted by material things either. A lot of them will like live in a van and just they're sort of that really sort of free energy, but to the point where they can feel suffocated trying to live like a life of planted and rooted and maybe have a family. It can hold them back when it's out of balance.
Yeah.
You see that, but they have like a lot of allergies. They can have ADHD and some of these other aspects. But yeah, tubercular, the psychotic miasm, which is actually born out of more gonorrheal things. So things like warts, if anybody is prone to warts, which is common in that sort of gonorrhea, you could have the psychotic miasm at play in your body, like real sexual transmitted diseases. So people in the metarhinum aspect, so that's the leading remedy for that. You know, syphilinum clears the syphilitic miasm. Medarhinum is the remedy associated with the gonorrhea psychotic miasm. And these people tend to have like this sexual distortion a lot of the time. So sex, drugs, rock and roll, like they love the excess, right? They like party hard. They're a bit like hedonists sometimes. They can have these sorts of aspects if it's a full-blown distortion of that energy, but they're not at the level of self-destruction of the syphilitic miasm. You know, when you look at our creatives, like in the world, a lot of our rock and roll stars, like whether it's like artists or music artists, you see in them, right, that real duality, like they're so gifted. They are literally channeling from another world. And they've got all these gifts, but they tend to be pretty self-destructive. So they're often alcoholics, drug abusing. They can flip up and down and it's like really rough. So that's more your self-destructive. You're moving on to the syphilitic, but they tend to be the more prominent of miasms. But all homeopaths can see that we've actually got more miasms that are becoming more dominant, you know, because women, again, who are on the oral contraceptive pill, they've created a miasm unto itself for the future generations. So the things that we see these days, they're kind of different to what Hahnemann.
So it's like emerging new types of miasms, essentially.
And you always just work with what you see. You know, some families, the miasm, it might be because of a specific drug that just they took, but then all the kids had issues after that. You'd clear that, say it's thalidomide or something. You'd want to clear that because the miasm could cause issues coming down the family lines.
Interesting. You mentioned homeopaths having their work cut out for them today. And I know one of the things that you're very proficient in dealing with is fertility issues. And I know we've brought it up a couple of times on this episode, but I want to talk about that a little bit more, just your general approach to men and women who have fertility issues because that's so prevalent today. Yeah.
When I first graduated homeopathy and I wanted to start to get into practice, I thought, okay, what's the field? Like, where do I want to start? And fertility, I loved. And back then too, so if we're going like 7 years ago, it was quite easy. So there was a fertility protocol that I'd learned, and doing that with patients, I was so lucky. I had about an 80% success rate. And it was just so good, right? And people talk, and that's how I built my practice. I built it online, and I would just say to people, okay, I'm going to do a trial and it's going to be free, but if you want to be a part of it, you have to have been actively trying to conceive for over a year. And I had a lot of nurses who were coming to me for that. And yeah, treating them with this fertility protocol, it was just like tick, tick, tick. And it was a beautiful field to work in because like, what is more exciting? I would get the emails, like everyone holding their pregnancy tests. And
amazing.
So exciting. And I can say though that there has been a distinct difference between treating back then and in this post-COVID era. Whatever is going on with fertility, it has dropped off a cliff.
There's so many things there. It's like the exposure to non-native EMFs has increased because we're spending so much more time indoors relative to how we were before COVID and immersed in just various overlapping non-native EMF fields. Also, obviously, the people who received the vaccine, like I think it's pretty clear at this point that that's caused fertility issues. I think the other thing that people don't often consider with this is the sort of field effect that is created amongst mankind, where people are so afraid in general, just the fear that is rampant in the morphogenic field, if you want to call it that, to where even if people are trying to conceive, they're struggling to, because there's like a subconscious belief that, oh, this is not a safe environment, therefore I cannot safely bring another being into this life. And then also just so much of the programming surrounding like it's too expensive, it's too this, it's too that with the economy right now. And I think it's like an amalgamation of all those things that is leading to the first fertility issues for sure. Because I know a lot of people who are like, yeah, I want kids, but it's like way too expensive to even consider that right now. I can barely survive on my own. I think it's just all those effects all on top of each other that is causing fertility to just drop like crazy. Obviously, like endocrine disrupting chemicals and things like this as well too. Like, don't get me wrong on that. But I think that was already happening prior to COVID. It's that COVID now, it's not fucking COVID. It's the governmental tyranny and like the vaccines.
It's the shift.
All of that. Yeah.
The shift.
Yeah.
Yeah. So after this sort of COVID era, really noticed that the fertility protocol as it was not breaking through people's cases. They were still having issues. Now, whatever it is that has impacted people's bodies and their fertility, I did absolutely notice. And so we have to adapt now. So rather than just being able to do like a basic protocol that would balance their hormones. So one of my favorite remedies in fertility, it's called folliculinum. It is potentized estrogen. So it's a homeopathic remedy made from estrogen, essentially. And when you give that back to the body, but it's actually a synthetic estrogen that they've taken it from. But it's so beneficial when you mirror that back to the body, because how many women these days are impacted by all these xenoestrogens and all of the pill and all the things that people have taken. And it's one of my favorite remedies because when a woman takes it, the effects are almost immediate. So if I had anybody who was skeptical about homeopathy and they're like, could it really work? Could it really be that powerful? I would think, take one single dose of folliculinum and come back to me in a month. Because all of my fertility clients, they would always be like, what the hell? Because, okay, when people are trying to get pregnant, you need a good amount of cervical mucus, which is like this egg white mucus, for the sperm to actually swim up and reach the egg. Now, because of the way that we live these days, a lot of women, and if they've been on the pill especially, that delicate balance of hormones got thrown off and they don't have enough cervical mucus. Like they have completely forgotten how much is normal and healthy and fertile if your estrogen spikes up around ovulation to try and enhance all those fertility factors. And so one dose of folliculinum, and people are like, what on earth? So it can really shift women's menstrual cycles around. So I never had issues when I started my practice with people being skeptical, because when you're working with a woman's menstrual cycle, homeopathy alters it drastically and quickly. So it was really powerful. Men with their sperm, it's not as obvious, but I've had patients where I've just treated them like in a classical. I've tried to find their simillimum and their sperm counts quadruple in the space of 6 months.
Wow.
Like massive increase. But of course, because you're stimulating their whole field, the testosterone, all of that follows the same way with women, so you give that folliculinum. So, but when fertility has gotten more difficult, as a homeopath, again, you just have to adapt. You got to work harder now because you need to know the simillimum and really figure out what layers are blocking you. And I sort of feel too that the nature of the world at the moment, we are really reaching this critical point, right? You see it in fertility, you see it in the complex kids that are coming through. They've got all these like issues. And this is like the fork in the road where we say, enough. We must return to a more natural way of living.
Yep.
We must. We cannot work 50-hour work weeks anymore and expect to get pregnant. It's like all around the world, our bodies and our fields are now saying, no, that's enough. We can't go. So I think that these are really beneficial things that, you know, collectively we're struggling with. If we can reconcile in our minds that we must be brave and live a new way.
Yeah.
You know, because it's hard for people to think that, you know, you shouldn't be immersing yourself in this constant overload of like being online and available 24/7. It goes against this feeling of like, I have to be productive and I have to do X, Y, Z. And it's like, no, you don't. And frankly, it's very unhealthy and you'll end up very sick if you continue. So yeah.
Very well said.
Fertility is just one of those canary in a coal mine situation. If our body can't reproduce, what does that say about how we're living?
Totally. 100%.
Yeah. It is really sad though. Like it was absolutely the most blessed aspect of my practice in that. And like, I mean, to this day, people send me photos of their kids like every Christmas. And like, as they're growing up, I'm like, oh my gosh, are you going to do this their whole life? I'm like, because some of these people, you know, they'd been through 9 rounds of IVF and they were at the lowest point of their life thinking they couldn't have kids. And then like within 4 months, they're pregnant just using homeopathy. And so to them, it's like they feel this such love of and allegiance to it. But what's really sad is that a lot of us these days in this younger generation, and I see it in fertility, we are wearing the effects of what our parents and our grandparents did. And that's sad to me that there are people in our generation who are seemingly completely infertile because of things that were done to them. And
that boomer generation was something else.
Yeah. They got to live with like, yeah, whatever, it's fine. Eat what you want, play, just yeah. Whereas like for us, we're so much more intentional. But unfortunately, we do have to be until we get back on track. And we will get to this point where we have turned it around enough. Now, there are some homeopaths in France, and I guess it's borderline eugenics, which eugenics has a bad name, but what they mean by it is if we treat the mothers before they have children, mothers and fathers, and we clear the miasms and we get them as strong as possible, and then we do it to that next generation, if we can do this for 3 or 4 generations, we might have returned people to the way that human beings are meant to function and thrive.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's their hope, that we can restore that, bringing in these subsequent. So that's our goal. But how do we get there? Well, for one, everyone needs to understand that homeopathy, what it can do. And I think we are going to merge to that point where the medical system at the moment is crumbling. You know, it really is. People don't want to take antibiotics. They don't want to take steroids. A lot of people who are taking these drugs are doing it because they think it's their only option. Mm-hmm. And that's all it is. It's just like, I'm desperate and you're my only option. What would happen if they knew it wasn't their only option, that there are better ways to heal? And we need to get it to the point where it's like economically, these people can afford it. Like one thing I loved about Samuel Hahnemann through his whole life of practicing as a homeopath is that not only was he sought out by the rich and famous, like he retired in Paris in the end, and he had the rich and famous coming to him, like famous artists, and he was their private homeopath, and he would indulge them in like hour-long conversations and consults, you know, with them. But at the end of every day, he shut his doors to them and he opened it to the poor, and they would get free treatment. He always did that up until like he died. And it's that sort of commitment to helping other people get back on their feet, because I think an issue at the moment is not only are there not enough homeopaths, we're so sought after, but it's like an expensive niche. But we need to get it to the point where, like in Australia, you know, my dad, people, well, I mean, it's government supported there. It's free to like go and see it. What would happen if as homeopaths, we were like their well checks? We become the dominant system of medicine. And then if something else is drastic and in need, you need a surgery, you need something, sure, go and get it. Absolutely, might save your life. But in Australia at the moment, our hospitals and our medical system, it is so weighed down with chronic disease. Like it's absolutely overwhelmed.
Obviously the same in the US.
And it's getting to the point of actually being dangerous. Like you call an ambulance and it takes half an hour to come because people are so sick and all of these things. That's dangerous. And so we all have to do our part in lightening that load. Keep the emergency, surgeries and trauma life-saving for accidents. Keep that, as the niche and like up here where it belongs. Yep. But we need to do our part in actually getting well again. And it's the homeopaths who can help people get there. Mm-hmm. No one else can help people the way a homeopath can. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's actually a good segue into talking about what you're trying to do with RMDY Collective and RMDY Academy and all the remedy things that you're doing.
So, number one, we need more homeopaths. So where we have had our biggest attack, what they're going to go for is the education providers. So in Australia in 2012, they put out a really corrupt report and they pretty much went to every university and strong-armed them into not offering homeopathy anymore. So all of these degrees that existed around the world, so it started in Australia and then they just went worldwide. And it was a really orchestrated attack. Like people were placed in certain positions in lobbying groups for years before their time came to sort of infiltrate and try and do it. But when you stop homeopathy being taught, that is the easiest way to try and ensure that a system of medicine dies out. Because if people aren't trained, people don't know, people can't access it, problem solved. You know what I mean? We're not a threat anymore. So we have our private academy. It has no, affiliations with the government. No one could shut us down, which I love. Mm-hmm. And we have seen recently the increase in interest in homeopathy is through the absolute roof. People are becoming obsessed. And it's that way that once you find it and you realize the depths of what it can do, it is obsessive, right? Like, look at Kylie. She's just like, can't get enough. She's just like, oh my gosh, because it's the solution that we're looking for and to help humanity live, the way we want to live. And so, in education. So in our first round of our course that we launched last year, we had 570 students sign up to this 2-year program to become a homeopath. That is quite literally the largest cohort of homeopathic students in history. Mm-hmm. There has never been an intake like that in any school around the world. So we can see that people are hungry for it and they are realizing post-COVID era that this is where the future really is. And so they're getting ready, right? They're like, I'm getting my practice in place to serve the people who are seeking me out. Because the issue is at the moment, there are not enough well-trained homeopaths to handle the weight of what the world is going through. Mm-hmm. So I think I looked up, and across the US, I think you guys have almost like 1 million MDs or something. So let's say it's something like that. How many homeopaths are we going to need to take the brunt of like general chronic disease, eczema, asthma, hay fever, allergies, all of the things that people go to their doctors for? And the reality is we need hundreds of thousands of homeopaths, well-educated, continuing education. And, for me, the dream has always been reestablishing those homeopathic hospitals. Yeah. So once you're trying to essentially take over
shift the paradigm of power back towards homeopathy and away from allopathy.
I want to be the Rockefeller of homeopathy, where it's like, I'm going to take all of your money and I'm going to pump it back into these hospitals where everybody knows what it can do, and provide a place for people to work and work together. Because like the reality is going forward, a lot of people have good ideas, right? But some people don't have resources. They don't literally have the finances to build the systems that it's going to take. But obviously in Remedy, it's like, that's why our vision is so big. It's like this. So we recently secured what will be our first homeopathic hospital. Now, I'm not allowed to write homeopathic hospital on the front of the building, but it will be the Remedy Homeopathic Center for Healing. And it's this, like, when I used to read the books about the history of homeopathy, I was literally overcome with this, like, it was like a grief feeling because I'm reading it and I'm jealous that all of these nurses and all of these doctors got to go to this place every day. And in these hospitals, they might have had like 3,000 beds, and they might have had 300 homeopaths working there. They had all these different wards and sections. They used to take them out into the sun in the day. They did some gardening together. This is the homeopathic hospitals. Like, they're so advanced. They know exactly what constitutes real healing. And I was so upset that I'm like, oh, I'm living in the wrong time. Like, that is all I want. And no one even knows it here. In Australia, it's like pretty suppressed. It's getting there, but largely your average person. And so that was always the fantasy. I want to build a place like for myself because I want to work there. Mm-hmm. And I know that other people want the same, and parents want it. You know, what happens when your kid is actually really sick and they need the support? They need to be watched overnight. They need someone there to prescribe for them immediately. Of course, well, for me, you would also want emergency physicians there to have the balance, people who know both systems. But people like parents are so desperate for these places to be set up because a lot of them they're fearful to go into the allopathic hospitals.
Understandably.
Because they're like, oh gosh, what are you going to try and force me to do? They feel dominated. What they need is people like us to bridge the gap and say, let's do everything possible to avoid needing any of those interventions, but we will safely look after you. And if you need it, so be it. Mm-hmm. But they want professionals who are there in the moment to monitor things. And so we got our place, and so that's being built at the moment. It's a new build, and it's like we're going to have our students, you know, coming there, and because it's that environment, I think, where it thrives. It's like that light on a hill, and people look and they go, oh my gosh, like what is this place? And our reputation, I mean, it builds quickly because homeopathy, we heal the chronic conditions that everyone else said you can't do it. And we say, if you can get the right energy in the body, your body can heal anything. I don't care what multiple sclerosis, I don't care what label you have put on it, the body is capable of healing if it's given the right stimulus. Mm-hmm. So I just know it's going to be so busy. But then it's, of course, for me, I'm thinking global. We've got a lot of students in the US, and it's like, this is why I've like partnered with you and Kylie, is how do we set up a place for them to come and continue that learning, sharpening their skills, for the community to come and get help. And again, I think people just have to see it done. Mm-hmm. And that's something in my academy that I take so seriously, like invite the students into my life, into my warehouse, watch me, look what I'm doing, come and see what we've done, and then go home to your state and connect with other homeopaths and do it because you can do it. But they've just not seen it done. All these people have these fantasies of, oh, imagine if. It's like, we can do it right now because I don't know what's going on in the world, but some vortex has opened up where I feel like our success is just, it's inevitable. Mm-hmm. Like everything is going right for us. And maybe it's just this universal, like time in history, it was always going to be this way.
I think it's a huge shift away from materialism and understanding that there's so much more to us than meets the eye. Mm. Like so many people are really starting to wake up to that. That's why you see series like telepathy tapes being ahead of Joe Rogan consistently over a period of time because people are at a point where we can really assimilate this information into our being and understand that it's not woo-woo, it's not fringe. This is a fundamental aspect of who and what we are. We're energy-based beings. Yeah. So, of course, by virtue of coming into that deeper understanding, people are going to realize, oh, there's forms of medicine that are related to this. Wow, these forms of medicine, when I peel behind the curtain, are actually much more effective than any of these other physical, materialistic-based forms of medicine. It's the time in history right now.
Yeah. And all of the work, that's coming forward, like all of the quantum physics, it all, of course, backs homeopathy completely and utterly. So now we've got the science to prove what we always knew was true, just experientially, like with our patients. We saw it. They healed from this. It's good. We'll do it. But now we've got the science to back it. But yeah, you've got a world now who is so intrigued by the metaphysical. And this is where, homeopathy, and they find it. And like all my students say, this is everything that I knew it was true, but then they see it organized in this system of medicine and they're like, oh, wow. So yeah, I think the world is opening up. Like it's just setting the stage that now is the time that we need to actually make that transition into the world that we want. And I truly believe that homeopathy has a front row seat to this. It's going to be part of this massive impetus for change, because it is not just about the physical diseases. It is about, like we said, people letting go and breaking all of those chains of addiction, of their compulsive thoughts, whatever it is, their fear of failure. And what happens when you have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people under the care of a homeopath, where they are stepping back into that almost Christ consciousness sort of light and like a loving nature and vibration. And that is what changes the world. It is vibration first. We reach that critical mass, and then all of a sudden we are incapable of being oppressed. We just won't, it just will not happen. Vibrationally, the code will not work anymore. We're not outsourcing our power. It's just that revelation of who and what we are. But homeopathy, like we said, it just ramps up that process so much.
Mm-hmm. So well said. Most healthcare today operates on an outdated mechanistic model, treating the body like a battlefield rather than a self-healing system. You wait months for an appointment only to receive a rush diagnosis that labels you rather than truly understanding your unique health. Even in holistic health, many practitioners rely on endless lab tests and supplement protocols, addressing symptoms instead of the root cause. And the result? Another prescription or supplement regimen that merely suppresses or masks symptoms rather than facilitating true healing, whether the imbalance was physical, emotional, energetic, or a mix of all three. And that's why Dr. Tom Cowan co-founded the New Biology Clinic, to offer something radically different. As one of the most respected natural health doctors in the world, Dr. Cowan has spent decades challenging conventional medicine and advancing a deeper understanding of human biology, water, and natural health. His work isn't just about rejecting the mainstream, it's about offering a more truthful, biologically coherent approach for healing. The New Biology Clinic recognizes that health isn't about fighting disease, it's about restoring balance. You're not a diagnosis, you're an individual with a unique story, and healing should honor that. With virtual consultations available worldwide, the clinic offers a flat-rate monthly membership that gives you direct access to practitioners who take the time to actually listen. Members also get exclusive health live streams, a resource library, and live sessions covering everything from biofield tuning and breathwork to movement and meditation, all designed to support whole body healing. And if you're not ready for a membership, you can book a one-time appointment, sign up for an enrichment-only membership for the healing modalities alone, or schedule a free connection session with one of the care team members to see how the New Biology Clinic can help in your specific situation. This isn't about keeping you dependent on doctors. It's about making you sovereign over your health. Head to newbiologyclinic.com and use code THEWAYFORWARD, and that's spelled The Way, F-O-R-W-A-R-D, for $50 off account activation, or just head to the show notes for more info. If you're a member of The Way Forward, email hello@thewayforward.com for $150 off. Your body already knows how to heal, and New Biology Clinic helps you remember. For generations, our ancestors lived in harmony with nature, thriving on a nose-to-tail approach to nourishment. Organ meats, often called nature's multivitamin, were a staple, providing essential nutrients that supported energy, brain function, skin, gut health, and reproductive vitality. Yet today, these deeply nourishing foods are largely missing from modern diets, leaving many of us unknowingly depleted. Let's be real though, most of us aren't eating organ meats the way our ancestors did. Whether it's the taste, texture, or simply a shift away from traditional foods, we've lost touch with this vital source of nourishment. And that's where Paleo Valley's grass-fed organ complex comes in. It's an easy way to reconnect with ancestral wisdom and replenish the nutrients we're meant to thrive on. Sourced from grass-fed cows on small regenerative farms in the US, this blend includes liver, heart, and kidney, freeze-dried to preserve their full nutritional integrity. No fillers, no synthetic processing, just pure, bioavailable nourishment. Those who incorporate the grass-fed organ complex notice more energy, balanced moods, and renewed vitality, sometimes within days. If this speaks to you, you can explore more by visiting the show notes or heading to paleovalley.com/thewayforward. And in this case, forward is fully spelled out. So paleovalley.com/theway, F-O-R-W-A-R-D. and a 15% discount will be automatically applied at checkout.
We can also see like how powerful beyond placebo homeopathy is. If it's not like really obvious already, it is just so beyond that. So when we look at even treating animals, who have no idea that it's being put in their water, we've got vets who specialize with homeopathy, and they are treating the cow's mastitis by putting the drops of the remedies into their water trough, and then it's healing them. They don't need the antibiotics and the other things. Even in farming, I've got a student and she has elderberry farms, organic elderberry farms. And when she is repotting and planting, in the earth, some of her elderberry, they use arnica on the roots. And they've done these controlled trials where they use homeopathy on some of the crops and the other ones they don't. When they pull them out of the ground and they look at the root systems of the ones that have used arnica, it's massive. It is a massive root system that it has grown compared to the control, which is just tiny in comparison. So even plants, even animals, of course, babies, like you give homeopathy to babies and they respond perfectly, whether it's like their eczema or their colic that was giving them absolute pain. And it just seems miraculous, people just think with homeopathy, but it's too good to be true that you just see it consistently over and over and over again. So it's, completely beyond the realm of placebo potential.
I mean, I already brought up telepathy tapes and how people are like looking into all this stuff at this point in history. But like another thing that really solidified to me that homeopathy is legitimate is understanding the work of Veda Austin, Masaru Emoto, also understanding the work of Eileen McCusick with respect to the human biofield, like tying all that in, and then Gerald Pollack's work with fourth phase water, understanding that we're likely comprised of fourth phase water ourselves, and it's like this liquid crystal matrix that is able to store, transmit, and receive information. It all just made sense to me. It all just finally clicked, like, okay, homeopathy really is legit. Like it's absolutely legit. And man, it's incredible.
And you've got even like Luc Montagnier, how do you say his name?
Luc Montagnier,
Yep. And he's saying the ultra high dilutions, they're not nothing. So here is a guy who's won a Nobel Prize for his work in whatever it was, HIV/AIDS, I think. But he is saying, and he came out in support of homeopathy, and then he got absolutely totally go for. But the power of homeopathy, it is extremely hard for them. It's so funny because they either say it does nothing, or they try to attack then and say like, no, it's dangerous and we have to take it off you. And it's like, well, which is it then really? Because they I don't know, crap, just don't let them build.
Didn't the FDA the US FDA try to put out like both of those narratives, that it's harmful or that it's literally those two things, right?
Yeah. It's like, which one is it today?
Yeah.
What way are you trying to suppress us again? But it's just not working because the people have the power now to choose what they want to do. So homeopaths are just completely sought after. People are also getting those kits in their home. So another part of the revolution is obviously we don't just need more homeopaths. We need parents to be equipped with basic knowledge of how to heal in the home because there's so much with those acutes that they can use it to support. Like Kylie says, I just go to my kit like all the time, like any little things that they just need support and tapped along with. And parents should have that knowledge. Knowledge is power. We were never meant to outsource it, even to homeopaths, to the level that people do these days. They want to book appointments for everything. It's like, it's quite so basic and so safe when you're doing it on that first aid prescribing level. So I would absolutely encourage people. Everyone needs just basic training. It's so not hard. And you have a reference booklet. So if the kids have got an ear infection, you literally run down the page. Is there pus coming out? Is it red? Is it throbbing? You get the little bits of information, you prescribe, voila.
We'll have all the info for that in the show notes for anyone who's watching or listening. I want to talk about too, because you are taking on and training homeopaths and you have this new enrollment for 2026 coming up too. How, I won't say easy because it's never easy to balance out, but a lot of my audience is stay-at-home moms, like that category. And you're someone who is both a mom and you embody that so well. And you're also running an academy and running a whole organization, but you're also a homeopath yourself. So I think that like of any form of formal medical training, this is probably the one that is best suited for those who still want to sort of balance out both lifestyles. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
No,
yeah,
completely. And, out of our 570 students, I would say probably 400 of them are mothers. A lot of them have their kids at home too. And it's the way that we have delivered this academy that makes it literally so flexible. And it's like you can do the lectures at any stolen moment, like when the kids are asleep and you're watching it and it's discussions and they're saying, I have never, and it's a lot of people who have never been good at studying. A lot of them had a fear of studying and they're like, but this is so different. It's like obsessive. They can't get enough. And the way that we deliver it, even actually the way that we've done it is quite revolutionary. And I'm so glad we just trusted our gut, because old school education, even in the natural medicine world, it's still quite didactic. It's like, I tell you, you regurgitate, you do this assignment. But what we said is, let's teach them exactly what they need to know to be good homeopaths. No fluff. Why would I have you write an assignment about the intricacies of this over here? What I need to see is that you can take a case and you can look in the books and you can pick a remedy and you can prescribe and you can get results. You can do a follow-up. It is so practical. And a big part of that is that I want you to watch me do it. I want you to watch from the start. How do I talk to my patients? How do I gather all of this information? There's an art to it. Mm-hmm. And, when I was a student, so I did an advanced diploma in homeopathy in Australia, then I did an honours in London. And I never got to watch professional homeopaths take cases, ever. I did a student clinic, but that was me fumbling my way through. So like, am I doing this right? I love that our students in our academy, like for the next 2 years, they're going to watch it, but then I am just going to have recordings going up constantly. Watch. And not just me, like greater homeopaths than myself. So Peter is brilliant. And what's funny is the original homeopath who got me into homeopathy, who treated my sister, who treated me and said, you'd be a good homeopath, When I opened RMDY Academy, of course, I said to him, be the lead. Like this guy is like Samuel Hahnemann sort of reincarnate, just crazy, smart, and obsessive. Like, no one knows the organon. So the organon is Samuel Hahnemann's like Bible. It's all of the intricacies of the art of homeopathy. And he just knows, he knows every page, every paragraph, every reference on philosophy. And that he's the greatest. And so, yeah, people, I think, are obsessed with the way we release it because it's modern. They can watch, they log into their portal and it's this gorgeous outlay of like all these stunning, course materials. But not only that, I'm in every lecture, in every presentation, I'm there, even when it's Peter might be leading the teaching, because when you get the different perspectives, and so there's 3 of us who are in every lecture, and we have conversations about the philosophy. And when students, I hear this often, Mel, when you say it, it just clicks, right? Because I can speak pretty simple because it wasn't that long ago. I was a student myself. I'm really good at synthesizing big ideas, but where they actually understand it, like even if they're coming in as a beginner. So I feel that those different perspectives are powerful, but you also want Peter in the back where it's like these deep nuggets of information about like how remedies might look similar, but they're slightly different,
Because he's been doing it for 30 years, right?
30 years. Yeah. And so has Jean, the other director. And she's phenomenal. And so like together, it's sort of like a dream team for us. But yeah, delivering it in a way. And now as a mother, I always used to dream, like when I was a stay-at-home mum and I was with my boys for 5 years and I just sort of had them back to back, Matt used to go to work and he would work like 12 hours like away. And so it's like exhausting. And you just dream of, and I would say to Matt, I'm like, one day it's not going to be like this. Like I'm going to find a way to make it not like this. And as a homeopath, because there is so much demand for work, I ended up saying to him, like, just quit. Like I can do this. Like people need me. And he was just like, totally, like I'll back you, which is like so amazing looking back because a lot of husbands would not be like, because it's not like at that point I was already really successful. I started from nothing. It was like, guys, I'm a homeopath. What do you need help with? Okay, book in here. It built up like it built quickly, but also at that first week, I did not have a month worth full of bookings. I had a couple that week and then it just snowballed. But of course, you see this in the world. You take that leap and you say like, universe, I'm open, like God help me. And it just far out. And so for all of the wives out there, I think if you have dreams like maybe of retiring your husband, having them home, like what a revolution in bringing people back into the home. You know, men, say with Matt now, he's like doing the farming outside and then the kids are like going to the school. It's like homeopaths are so needed. When you Robin Hood the pharmaceutical industry and you're bringing the money into these families' lives, that's revolutionary in and of itself, because why are we paying? And, you know, some people in the natural medicine sphere, they have this sort of like money mentality of like, if you work in natural medicine, you should be really good-hearted. And as such, like making money, they've got like issues, like a lot do. I don't know if it's the same in America, but definitely in Australia, it's like this vibe. And they don't
Probably
have
the same in America.
Yeah, they don't have professional boundaries and they don't see themselves as the success that they should be. I consider myself as a homeopath like absolutely elite in like the medical field. I went to a networking event recently we were invited to in the area where we are building our homeopathic center for healing. And it's beautiful because there's a lot of rich, powerful people in that area who built this city and they're Indian. Now in India, homeopathic medicine is revered. So they look at me and they understand compared to most Western doctors don't know. And I like walk into that group and I think, I can do so many things you guys can't. I'm not intimidated at all. Like someone could tell me like they're a surgeon or like whatever. And it's like amazing. I just consider homeopathy and I want to teach our students, you need to understand we are not playing around. Like Peter has this quote and he like tells the students all the time, he's like, guys, this is not macrame 101. Like, you know, that knitting, like macrame. He's like, this is not macrame. Like it's not this soft little delicate like holistic adjunct.
Right.
This is full-blown medicine. Take it seriously and take yourself like seriously and respect what you're doing. Build a very successful practice, because if people step into that level of power and respect for our field, it transforms everything. To downplay the power of what we do, it doesn't benefit anyone. There are people out there, they're waiting for these students to stand up and like brightly create these beautiful places and spaces for them. So yeah, I do think like the energy of success, that's important, because there have been like times where there've been some great homeopaths, but they tend to not be as good at the business side. And no one's good at everything, but you know, there are ways to build a successful practice and you can balance it. You know, you work as many hours as you want. And as a homeopath, you know, when Matt then retired and he's home with the kids and I just sneak into the room next door and I put in my earphones, I would be consulting with people all over the Middle East, in the US, in Bosnia, in like the most random places. I can consult with anyone around the world and then I ship them their remedies. And what a flexible, like amazing way to build a business. Like I loved connecting with people from all over because I'm not even bound by a small city that I work in. I don't need to have people come into my clinic. I actually had a really nice clinic for a while there and I would go in and I'm like all dressed up and then I would open my laptop because all my clients were either in another state or international. No one was coming in. So you have no overheads. It's literally just consulting.
Incredible. And you mentioned there the power, like understanding the power of what you're dealing with homeopathy. And I know you have some pretty ambitious goals with wanting to make homeopaths ubiquitous across the earth at this point. So just share what you would like to see for 2026 and how many homeopaths you want to enroll and train with your 2026 opening.
So I'm going to put this out there that every goal that I've ever put out since we've been working with RMDY Collective, so it started off just me in private practice and then I was getting like too busy. I said to my sister, so she's 12 months younger than me, and I'm like, Ash, I need you like help. And so she comes across and now we have a team of 15 of us, which is just huge. Everyone knows their part. And for me, it's like I'm the academy devoted in, that's what I'm raising the new ones. And, so whenever we run a course, we've run like a lot of little short courses, and I might say the first one and I say this crazy goal, like, all right, let's aim for 200. And the thing about my sister is that she worked for real estate agents. She's always been a PA for like really good real estate agents. And she's like, okay, you tell me your goal. All right, let's double it. Yeah, let's. And so she's the same. We're like, yeah, let's have these crazy things. And we literally get bang on. So we said with our academy, let's go like in the 500s. And like literally like, that is such a crazy number for a first intake, like biggest in history. And so now the number that was coming up for me is like 5,000. In 2026, we want to bring on 5,000 students to train up to be homeopaths, and they can be from all around the world. Our students right now are completely international. And in that, you think like, yeah, is that realistic? Like that is so realistic given the world that we're living in. If we've got 1 million medical doctors, starting with 5,000 homeopaths is like, that's nothing. And so that is our goal. From that, we then want to establish the homeopathic centers for healing, get the hubs going so that they've got that local space to come and connect. Because as convenient as the online world is, everyone loves a brick and mortar place. Like even if people only wanted to go and work a couple of days a week in this full big center, it's so much fun. It's like homeopathic events, hanging around with homeopaths. It's so much fun. So we definitely want to build these places, and that's what we'll do. So September 2026, we only do an intake every 2 years because we take the students from start to finish. They graduate. Like in September 2026, we have a lot of our students will come. We're doing like the big graduation ceremony, and like they are so excited, even like, you know, the caps and the gowns. And they're like, I never imagined that I would be somebody to study and actually graduate and just be so obsessed with like the life that I now lead. It just has unlocked in them this absolute beauty. And the people who are doing it, like in regards to the course material, some people, they have genuine fears of like, am I smart enough to do this? Like they think like, I love it. And I'm like, I'm so keen. Like I have some guys in the course and they're tradesmen and they're like, I just like, so they might be chippies, like carpenters. And they're like, but I love this sort of medicine. And like, do you think, you know, I've never been one to do formal study. I'm such a like hands-on guy. And they're fine. It's in the delivery. It's in the assessments just being appropriate and not unnecessary. And yeah, so I think we will absolutely nail it. And I think this is the turning point. Like, I think we've already had the turning point, to be honest. We're already on the up and up. But I think homeopathy is about to see its like absolute restoration to where it should have remained this whole time, but we are restoring it. And I think it's like not even anything that I'm doing. It's like on that collective quantum level, it's seeking out all of the people who were always meant to walk this journey with us. Like they were always going to find it. Like even the connection with you and Kylie, and Kylie's like, I was already like obsessed, and now she's in the academy, and it's like, you just know that this is like a divine intervention thing. Everyone is getting the call of it and they can't deny it. And they're just like, I've just got to do it. I will literally do anything to complete this.
Incredible. Well, we're here to help you achieve that goal for sure.
Love it.
Yeah.
I love it. It's going to be so good.
Okay, before we wrap up, I have one more thing I want to touch on though, because you mentioned it and I'm now incredibly curious, like the Fibonacci homochords. Can you touch on that a little bit more? I know we're jumping back to something at the very beginning, but I want to hear about that a little bit more.
So the Fibonacci sequence, obviously people say it's like God's fingerprint in the universe, all through nature. Animals do it, flowers do it. And we had this theory with the frequencies of these remedies that we make in the pharmacy. It's not like a linear. The frequency doesn't go up. It's almost like it follows a sine wave. But then even more than that, what happens if we give a frequency that falls along the Fibonacci spiral there? And so it's, you know, DNA, we're giving the body the frequency in a combination perhaps that it would recognize even more powerfully than the remedies on their own at these other arbitrary frequencies.
Because you're using the frequency of God's fingerprints, essentially.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And
how does that work? Like, how do you infuse that into the remedy?
So it's in regards to the actual potencies themselves. So we combine, so in the homeopathic pharmacy, we do the dilution, succussion. Dilution, succussion. Now, let's say you do it up to a 3C. You've done that process 3 times. So diluting to 1 in 100, succuss.
Yep.
Dilute,
1
succuss.
part's the chemical to 100 parts water, and then
1 to 99. Yep.
Yeah, 1 in 99,
Yeah.
and then doing that again and again and again.
Yes.
Got it.
So what we actually combine in our Fibonacci Homochords then is the 3C potency, and then you go up to 5.
Got it.
Then
That's
we
how
add
you're
the 8, and we go all the way up to 233. So we've combined 10 different frequencies in one bottle. What's interesting is that when you give the single potency, a lot of the time homeopaths are finding like it's not fireworks. It's not like rapid healing. It's not like what I've given you and what I've given Matthew and what I've given my patients for the last 3 years. We get movement, and it's incredible. So I'm a big advocate for the Homochords. I love them. And what we also find is that because you've combined all of those frequencies into one bottle, you actually have less negative effects, where some other homeopaths, they have this severe fear of aggravating, like that true aggravating where the patients are completely out of sorts, can't continue. It's like they're left stuck in like a bit of a traumatized state and they're not pushing through. Whereas our more liberal prescribing techniques with the Fibonacci Homochords, it seems to move them through that process so quick. So I'm never afraid of when it gets bumpy because I know it's like it's over soon and they can tolerate it. Whereas some practitioners, they really worry about things getting bumpy and so they hold back, but then they don't get the breakthroughs that we want. So I love the Homochords for that reason, because you're much more likely, if you give 10 potencies in one bottle, there is a very good chance that the perfect potency you need is in there. Now, I don't know which one it is. It doesn't matter. Your body receives it and it responds. So let's say you and Maddie, you're both taking Syphilinum and Aurum, and you might need the 233C. You're closer up there. You're vibrating up there. He might need the 5C. You still get your breakthroughs because it's individualized for what you need. And
because that's all contained within the bottle.
Within the one bottle. Right. And it doesn't seem to mess up or overlay. People still respond perfectly. So we know that somehow putting all of those frequencies in one bottle, it still keeps its integrity, its structure. And you look at it like a radio. You are tuned to one radio station. Yeah, they're all around. You can change your station and you can hear it, but only you can hear one frequency in that bottle. So, yeah.
That makes sense. Wow. Do you do that with all the remedies that you guys make? That's amazing.
I do. If I own them in multiple potencies, I do it.
That's amazing. So cool. Okay, so everything we've talked about, you can find more in the show notes if you're watching on audio or video. Mel, thank you so much for coming all the way over here for this. It was awesome.
Thank you. I've loved every second.